It is Thursday night in East Lansing, Michigan. Come on in, gather around, gather around, gather around. My name is Jim Comparoni, publisher, SpartanMag.com. It's a Thursday night in East Lansing, Michigan. It's snowing out there. It's cold. It's blowing. It's a cold night in East Lansing. Got up to like 55. No, about 50 earlier today. Now it's back down to 28, and it's snowing. Kids are hoping for a snow day. It's good. It's a February night. Michigan State basketball is over at Michigan State basketball practice today. We'll talk a little bit about that. We'll do some film room tonight. Look at Michigan State, some of the collapse at Penn State, what went wrong. A lot of people grouchy about that, looking for answers, looking for help. I might not have any help, but it's good to get some closure on things and look a little closer and do some serious basketball study here for the serious basketball fans. Don't want to neglect you guys. Over at basketball practice today is very interesting. We'll be talking about that. Might open the phone lines. Expect to hear from Paul Konerdijk around 9:30 tonight. We'll talk Michigan State basketball with him. We got some questions, mailbag style. We will be answering those here at SpartanMag Live. A lot of football questions tonight. Great to have you every week talking Michigan State sports, doing it on Thursdays this time of year because I like to get in there and watch practice on Thursday. They let us watch practice usually 2 days before the 2 days before each game. And if they play on Tuesday, they won't let us in necessarily on Sunday. It's a weekend. But if they're playing on Saturday, like they normally do, then Thursdays are open for media to watch. And also some interviews, so it's always good to have the freshest information after letting the Tuesday night game settle a little bit. Get into Thursday, start looking forward to Saturday's game against the Illini. The Illini coming in Saturday at noon, Breslin Center. So we'll be talking about that and having a good time with it. We got some questions. We'll get to those in a minute. If you don't know what any of this is, if you're just stumbling across this out on the YouTube sphere, my name is Jim Comparoni, publisher, SpartanMag.com. SpartanMag.com is a website covering Michigan State sports. We're very happy for the subscribers. We have thousands of subscribers all over the country, all over the world, really. SpartanMag.com, the internet offshoot out of the old Spartan magazine, which was formed back in like 1991. I became editor in 93. Publisher, owner in 95. No, actually, publisher, owner in like 2000. Anyway, SpartanMag.com. That's the little operation we have over there. It's a news organization. We're proud of it. We feel like we do a pretty good job with some credible information and a lot of analysis. And we have a lot of fun over at SpartanMag.com's Underground Bunker message board, which is the church of what's happening now with Michigan State sports, the daily narrative on everything pertaining to Michigan State athletics, the Underground Bunker message board. SpartanMag.com. SpartanMag.com, established back in like 1996, 1997, pretty much the beginning of the internet. Been bringing it to you over there at SpartanMag.com ever since, with a lot of help from great people like Paul Konerdijk, Jason Killip, Noah Sprunger, Ricardo Cooney, Rico Beard back in the old days. He's got more important things to do now. He's doing a great job in Detroit. Matt Dorsey, you haven't seen the last of him. It's good to have him and all the cast of thousands, all the characters over at SpartanMag.com, and the coverage that we bring for our subscribers. Couldn't do it without you guys. Appreciate everybody filing in. We're going to talk Michigan State sports like we always do. Let me check the mailbag. We'll go straight to it for the questions. Question number one, Marlington from Austin, Texas. I think Marlington's from Austin, Texas. He's saying, if I could magically fix one thing for this Michigan State basketball team right now with the snap of a finger, what would it be? It's a good question. He's asking for some wishes for Michigan State basketball. Michigan State is now 18-7, 9-5 in the Big Ten, having lost at Penn State 62-58, squandered a 13 or 14-point lead. Victory over Indiana over Breslin Center on February 12th, 76-61. Looked physical, looked strong against Indiana. Just a couple hours ago over at the post-practice press conference with Tom Izzo, I asked Tom Izzo if he was surprised that did he think that the team had turned a corner in terms of physicality and toughness in that game against Indiana, and was he surprised to see a step backward against Penn State on Tuesday? I didn't even get a chance to finish the question, and he said shocked. And we will get some we got some audio, I think, and some video of Izzo after practice today. Just a couple of minutes, just a little soundbite snippet to bring that to you. In the meantime, give us a thumbs up here at our SpartanMag.com channel. Also subscribe to our SpartanMag.com YouTube channel. Go over to SpartanMag.com and consider becoming a subscriber. We would love to have you over there. Many of the people that chime in here are subscribers, SpartanMag.com, and we appreciate having them. Let me check, make sure that everybody, looks like everybody can hear me. Looks like everything is underway over here in the chat area. Go ahead and put some comments in the comment area or questions. We will get to those as we run through those and do the way we normally do this. Spartan Mag Live every week. During the football season, we were normally doing it on Tuesday nights. And sometimes it gets out of hand and we go 3 hours. I don't know if that'll happen tonight. Hopefully not. I don't know if I've got enough voice for that, and you don't have the patience for that. But sometimes you just never know what's going to happen. Would like to get these down shorter. I've been saying that for a long time, and maybe do it 3 times a week with maybe a shorter one in there somewhere. Could happen. But we're just busy all the time, all week, and haven't really squared that away. But we would like to do that soon. Anyway, getting back to the question, if I could snap my fingers and change one thing about this team, what would it be? And I'll throw that question out there to the masses. If you want to put it over there in the chat area, put what you think your answers would be to that. I'd be interested to know. My answer, I had to plug in my phone because I think Conan X is going to call later. My answer, also, I'll do it the quick way. Turn off Do Not Disturb. We're high tech here.
Do Not Disturb is now off.
Very primitive. Anyway, there's a couple things to choose from. I think that A.J. Hoggard is on the cusp of becoming a good, solid point guard. He's already a pretty good, solid point guard. The passing statistics he's putting up right now are borderline excellent in terms of productive assists. He's really cut down on the turnovers. And some of his passing, I mean, he delivers some really terrific court vision passes, both in the half court and in the full court. If Hoggard could shoot the ball well, medium range and from deep range, that would do so much for the offense, and it would solidify him as the point guard. And I wouldn't be surprised if this point guard thing starts morphing toward a 25-minute, 15-minute type of thing. And I think that might have been the case at Penn State, but then Hoggard went down with a twisted ankle. At practice today, Hoggard was playing. Izzo said after practice he'll be fine. Normally, I wouldn't come out there and give an injury report like that, but Izzo went ahead and addressed it during post-practice press briefing today, so I feel comfortable going ahead and divulging that. A.J. Hoggard's the ankle's going to be, it's looking pretty good right now. He missed pretty much the last 6 or 7 minutes of that Penn State game, twisted his ankle late. You give that kid a jump shot, and he's much better. The offense is much better. A lot of things are better. Would that be my choice? I'm not sure. More mental and physical toughness out of Marcus Bingham. That would be a choice. Izzo sat him down the last 8 minutes of the game at Penn State. He only played 15 minutes, gave up an offensive rebound after Izzo was already not thrilled with Bingham 4 minutes into the game. And Izzo's been trying to bring Bingham along with some tough love and also some pats on the back. You might remember early in the Indiana game, they ran a pick and pop to Bingham for a three-pointer. I think it was the first field goal of the game, Michigan State's second possession. Izzo told us after the game, he said, "You might not believe this, but we scripted that in. We told Bingham 2 days earlier, we are going to you." Early, second possession of the game, pick and pop, nailed it. Why are they doing that? He was rewarding Marcus Bingham for having a really good practice week. And Izzo said the same after the post-practice press briefing last Thursday. He said if Bingham plays like he did in practice today, we will be fine. We'll be in good shape. He's trying to get more of that from Bingham with some of that positive reinforcement. So he gets positive reinforcement on one end after a good week of practice, good game against Indiana, comes out against Penn State, has a little bit of a relapse. A lot of a relapse. So sits him. Bingham is very important. He's still really good with that ball screen defense in terms of lateral movement. Does sometimes he start hunting for shot blocks a little bit too much and loses the rebounding position. There's a happy median in there somewhere. But the mental toughness, the focus is something that they're trying to focus in on right now. And if you can give Bingham a little bit of that, that'd be good. Giving him physical toughness, I mean, with a magic wand, I'd love if you're Michigan State, you'd love for Max Christie to all of a sudden be able to shoot like Larry Bird. I mean, he shoots pretty well right now, but in terms of realistic things, yes, you would like Marcus Bingham to all of a sudden be built like Kevin Willis, a latter-day Kevin Willis. Okay, that's not realistic. Hoggard becoming a better shooter, probably not going to happen anytime soon, but could he find a decent shooting level of effectiveness? I don't know, possibly. Here in the short term, It'd be difficult to do, but it's possible. We've seen guys find their shooting stroke late in the season sometimes. I don't know if that's happening with him. He's a better shooter than he was last year. He's heading in the right direction. Those of you that are old enough remember when Eric Snow was a terrible shooter as a freshman and as a sophomore, a shaky shooter, became pretty good as a junior and quite good as a senior, became an NBA player. Nobody would have thought that as a sophomore. A.J. Hoggard is similar to what Eric Snow was as a sophomore. If I could snap my fingers, the question is make one thing better. I mean, if you can get Max Christie to shoot like Max Christie can, not asking him to become Larry Bird, just asking Max Christie to become the best freshman version of Max Christie he can be, that would go a long way toward helping this team. The shots against Penn State in the backcourt when you've got Gabe Brown 2 of 8, Max Christie 4 of 11. They're 1 of 9 combined from three-point range. 6 out of 19 for those guys. 6 out of 23, was it? Yeah, 6 out of 23 for the starting backcourt. Brown, Christie, and Hoggard. 6 out of 23. You need better than that. But here's the deal. If you get poor shooting, there are going to be poor shooting nights. But where Izzo's always been good and what he's always trying to get in his team, what he's always trying to harness for March or in general is to be great with defense, rebounding, toughness, focus, all those things. Because those things, if you have them, those travel, whether you're playing on the road, neutral site game, NCAA tournament game, those things give you a level of consistency as a team and they carry you in those nights when you have a cold shooting night. You can still win games based on defense, rebounding, toughness, and those things. This team has been blinking defense, rebounding, toughness, right? So then when they have a cold shooting night like Michigan State had at Penn State, you lose to a team you should beat. That being said, Penn State was still a well-coached team that night. Much better coached than the first time Michigan State played Penn State. First time they played, I was kind of shocked at how poor of a job Penn State did in transition defense in that game. Michigan State scored like 30 transition points. Shrewsbury's a former assistant coach at Purdue, right? He should know you have to get back on defense against Michigan State. There's a decent number of veterans on that team, and they played like they had no scouting report on Michigan State's transition game. In the rematch at Happy Valley, Penn State was all about getting back on defense. And meanwhile, Michigan State's transition offense is down several hundred RPMs from what it was in December. The team's gotten a little, it's dog days. Everybody's a little bit tired. Christie's hitting that freshman wall a little bit, other things going on, and the transition game has lost some of that spunk. Is that a word we can use on this continent? Is that clean over here? So a lot of things going, a lot of things to chew on there. Izzo would say, now we're assuming if you get good shooting from Bingham and from Christie and Brown. Those guys have to be like 39% three-point shooters. I know they're not there right now. I think Christie's like 32, 33%. And Brown is down to like 37%. He was up in the 42s a few weeks ago. You get those guys to 39%, and that's not asking a lot. That's what they could be, should be. That's what Michigan State needs from their wings, from three-point range. That can change a lot of things if those two guys are up around there. They can do that. So that's not really a snap your finger wish thing. That's like snap your finger wanting those guys to be what they can. You get those guys being what they can. Hoggard come a little bit more, and then Bingham, if he can lock into some of that passion and toughness they're looking for. I tell you what, I would not count out Hauser from erupting as a shooter. You know how Kenny Goins all of a sudden became real good late in his career? And I know Hauser's not late in his career necessarily. He's up there, but he can come back next year and everything. Even A.J. Granger late in his career caught on to something. Erasm Lorbeck late in his freshman year was completely different than he was earlier in the season. That's a freshman. I wouldn't count out Hauser finding a groove as a shooter. I wouldn't count that out. The question again, if I could fix one thing, Izzo, if he could fix one thing, he would want a leader on this team. After practice today, he was lamenting a little bit that the leadership right now it's gone from questionable to kind of non-existent. And they needed a leader in that Penn State game. And when things were getting shaky a little bit, they needed someone to snap some guys to attention and guide that thing home. Didn't happen. So Izzo would say leadership. If any of those guys, if a Hogard or a Malik Hall could become, not even like a Cleaves or a Draymond Green type of leader, but if you can get like a Travis Walton type of leader on this team, it would make a big difference. All right, I'm going to go ahead and post something over here, over at Twitter, and let people know that this nonsense is going on over here at Spartan Mag Live. Again, we appreciate all the Spartan Maggers out there and the Michigan State fans across the country that are subscribers to SpartanMag.com. Also, those that are subscribers here to the channel that are thinking about becoming subscribers to SpartanMag.com. We really are happy that you're with us every week and all the time and every day and every hour over at SpartanMag.com. All right. Let's see. Question number 2. Alex from Los Angeles. He said, where would I like to see Kenneth Walker III drafted? Where would I like to see Kenneth Walker III drafted? I'd say if you're a Michigan State fan, somewhere where Michigan State recruits. You'd like to see that guy to go someplace where Michigan State recruits, far from East Lansing, have him become an NFL star, have him become known in that area. So I would think anywhere in Florida, anywhere in Texas. If they could get an NFL star running back in those 2 states, go down there and recruit to it, that'd be good. Question number 3. Taylor from Los Angeles. Taylor from Los Angeles. He says, let's see. What's the biggest difference between the current version of the Michigan State basketball team and the team that beat UConn in November? And what are the chances that we see the November version again this season? Great question, Taylor from Los Angeles. Great question. And, and UConn looked great that day. I thought they had like Elite 8 capabilities. They've went on and lost some games with regularity this year, kind of like Michigan State. They haven't really settled in to be as powerful as I thought they could or should be. And Izzo mentioned that today post-practice press conference. He was talking about the way Michigan State looked that day, just right up the alley of your question. And one of the things he was talking about back in those days was Michigan State's level of defense. He said, hey, man, we played great defense back then. And we will have that press conference here on the YouTube channel later tonight. I might go ahead and load that right now so it's up by the time we're done. Nah, I better wait on that. I can't do 2 things at once. I'll do that later when we're done here. But Izzo talked about that today and mentioned the defense that Michigan State played back then, and it goes right to your question. Can Michigan State get back to that level of defense? That's what Izzo's trying to get to. And yes, I think they can. And Izzo's starting to crank it up and get cranky and get grouchy and play and coach with a snarl. He's got a snarl going right now. He's getting into that post-Valentine mode, post-Valentine's Day mode. And it usually reaps some nice benefits. Now, this is a little bit different mixture for him. He's irritated because, as he said after the Penn State game, that the things he's been emphasizing, these guys are not adhering to it. And it's frustrating him, and it's puzzling him a little bit. So he's looking for the right buttons to push on all of that. But defense, that focus, passion, attention, toughness, if you get those things back to a Michigan State level, then rebounding will come back, and then defense will come back. Julius Marble, we talked to him after practice a little bit today, and he was talking about focus being a problem. You wouldn't think it's a problem, but just when you're up 13 at Penn State, you don't play the score, you don't play the opponent, you just play Michigan State basketball. And they are falling short in those areas. And that's what they're trying to get after. Let's go to the Izzo cut from. I got about 2 minutes here from his post-practice press briefing from earlier today. This was over at Breslin just about 3 hours ago.
I mean, we're sitting there knocking on the door, and that's what we want to be. And appreciate that these guys are knocking on the door, and we're going to keep knocking on the door, and hopefully, it still comes. It still comes, because it can.
Were you surprised? You probably thought you were making some progress in terms of passion, intensity, and physicality in the Indiana game. Were you surprised?
I don't know if you can hear the question there, but I'm asking the question. Tom Izzo, you probably felt your team was making some progress in terms of physicality, passion, and toughness against Indiana. He nodded and said yes. And then I started to ask, were you surprised to see those things wane in the Penn State game? I didn't get a chance to finish the question. He jumps right in with the answer.
That it took a step?
Shocked. No doubt about it. Shocked. But it seems like, it seems like we just got to realize that you're not playing a team sometimes, you're playing the game and you're playing against yourself. And if you get up 15, that doesn't mean you win the game. And if you play a team that doesn't have as many wins, that doesn't mean you win the game. And that's the part that's been most disappointing. And if you ask me, players and coaches both should take offense to it and responsibility for it. And that's what I'm trying to do. And yet, I keep reminding myself, we're 18-7. And back when I was an assistant, we were having a party right now. We're having a party.
Did you see when you looked out of the court at Penn State a couple times where the light goes off
Yeah.
on some guys?
Yeah, I saw it. A couple bad shots, you guys were there. A couple of bad turnovers and a couple of unbelievable shots by them. They hit a couple Chryslers, that went in. But yeah, I saw it. And then when we got it down to 6, I could see in the huddle, that's where you need a leader. That's where you got it. But you know what? That's where the coach got to do a better job too. So I'm just going to have to look at this, learn from our mistakes and make sure we don't make the same mistakes again.
All right, that's Tom Izzo from just a couple hours ago after practice over at Breslin. Again, commenting on the need for leadership. And sometimes you need that leader to guide you home when things start to get a little haywire on the road against a beatable team like Penn State. The lack of leadership hasn't really hurt them necessarily, maybe in some regards this season, but it really, it showed, that might be the first time it showed itself in terms of losing a winnable game to a lesser opponent. Yeah, maybe the Northwestern game at home, the offensive rebounds that were allowed in the turnovers in that game. But I think the Penn State game, he's been talking about needing better leadership all year. That game, it really came to the forefront a little bit more. So to answer your question, Taylor from Los Angeles, biggest difference between now and the UConn game, defense would be the answer on that one. How do you get back to that? Focus, physicality, fluff the pillows a little bit more. If that happens, then rebounding will get better also. Dan from Denver says, now he wants to talk a little football. He says, does name, image, and likeness with no salary cap have the potential to ruin college football and further widen the gap between the haves and the have-nots? Name, image, and likeness, no salary cap. Does that have potential to ruin college football? Could it ruin college football for some people? I think it could ruin the romantic outlook of college football, the romantic thoughts of college football that some people have and have had, because it's semi-professional now. That will sully the viewpoints of some fans, or it might create more other fans. There'll be fans in the Southeast that don't care. They're going to just, more. Could it ruin in that way? I don't know, maybe. All right, could it, in terms of further widening the gap, could that happen? Name, image, and likeness between the haves and have-nots. I think it's just you're going to have maybe a slightly different group of haves. For instance, Clemson has been a have in recent years. Great facilities, a well-funded, well-supported program, highly paid coordinators, and they had a real nice era. But they're not going to be able to spend with Texas A&M, Texas, with name, image, and likeness. Maybe not USC. I mean, we'll see what USC does. Everybody says everything in Los Angeles is going to create some name, image, and likeness opportunities out there. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. Remains to be seen. Place like Nebraska, could they come back now? What does Nebraska have? They have an entire state that is all wrapped up into one team, one sport. And, I mean, the guy at Berkshire Hathaway's never been a big Cornhusker booster, and I'm not saying that Nebraska is up to their eyeballs and billionaires or anything, but that football program runs the state and every player on that team. It would not take much hustle or imagination to get a nice name, image, and likeness for every starter on that team and a lot of backups, just because they're the most famous celebrities in the state of Nebraska. It's a small pond, but they're big fish in that small pond.
Call from
Paul Konendijk.
to accept, press 1. To send a voicemail.
All right, we're going to go out to our friend out Lowell, Michigan, Paul Konendijk, Associate Editor, SpartanMag.com, joining us here today, Spartan Mag Live. Paul, how you doing, man? You doing okay?
I'm doing good, man. I'm watching the snow come down out the window.
How many inches they expecting to get out that way?
I don't know, but my wife, who's a teacher, says there's not going to be a snow day, so that means she's hoping for one.
All right, okay. So I've not had a chance to talk to you since that Penn State game. Michigan State losing 62-58. We've been talking about it here already on the show tonight. And, Izzo talked about it after practice today, really lamented a lack of leadership. That was a game in which he thought leadership could have made a difference in terms of stemming the tide as Penn State was coming back. Michigan State losing that double-digit lead. What were they, up 13 or so with 15 minutes to go? Penn State came storming back. Everybody knows what happened there. Your thoughts on that game as you look back on it and what it means going forward? I guess you could probably write 10,000 words on those two questions. Start off that Penn State game. What were your thoughts about that game?
Yeah,
What's your takeaway from that one?
Yeah, I mean, going from the leadership angle, what does he mean by leadership? It's got to be more than words. I think what Tom Izzo's talking about is he wants guys that are his veterans to make plays. And that's one of the problems that they had. And I know, like Gabe Brown, like Aaron Henry last year, was it like when they started really kind of turning it around, he was able to put the team on his back and do some things. Gabe Brown's not that guy yet. I don't know if he ever will be, but when Tom Izzo talks leadership, I don't know if it's vocal leadership. I think it takes a lot of different, I think it takes a lot of different forms. And so one part of leadership is making plays when they have to be made. And that's a process for guys. I think that Michigan State did a poor job of that. But I also think that guys need to understand that that you're not going to win the game because you beat that same team, but handily at your own place because you got a bunch of points in transition. Doesn't mean you're going to get them again. We've seen Michigan State's worst two losses, Penn State and Northwestern, kind of the script got flipped on them. They got out rebounded, or it was a close rebounding margin after kind of dominating in the first inning, and they had their transition buckets taken away. So where are you going to get your buckets from? But I think the leadership. You look at Gabe Brown; he's got to make more shots. You look at Marcus Bingham. That's your other guy, your other senior. He's got to he's got to do more than hit occasional three, get a couple early block shots. He's got to be a presence throughout the game, and he's got to do it on both ends of the floor, and he's got to rebound. And, there's so many different things that went wrong for Michigan State against Penn State. And I think the big thing that Michigan State's got going on is maybe not a lack of leadership. It's, they've got to find a way to rebound against teams that they should dominate against. And Hara from Penn State, the big guy, he's a very good rebounder. But if you keep on going after him over and over and over again throughout a game, and you've got a consistent inside presence, you can wear that guy down. And they got to have more than Julius Marble off the bench. They got to have Marcus Bingham's got to be the Marcus Bingham he was at the beginning of the year.
Yes.
And does that have something to do with COVID? I don't know. Does it have something to do with him, chasing the block shots record and falling in love with a 3-pointer every once in a while? I don't know. But the guy that they had to start off the season, that hungry Marcus Bingham, Michigan State needs that guy back. That is the number one thing that can turn this thing around. I hear people talk about point guards all the time. I hear people talk about, this guy that's not stepping up or that guy that's not stepping up. The one thing that gives you a defense that can travel is Marcus Bingham playing like he did at the beginning of the year. And until that happens, until he gets that back, until they get him back, if they get him back, you're going to have games like this where they can lose to anybody. and they're not going to compete with the top teams in the conference unless Marcus Bingham plays like he did pre-COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And that's I don't know if they're going to get I don't know if they're going to get that from him, but they need it,
Right.
Because this is not a good rebounding team, and if you can't defend and you can't rebound, you can't be Michigan State.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the brass tacks version of Marcus Bingham, the brass tacks version of Michigan State. This team doesn't really have that right now, but Bingham, if he could develop here in the late stages of the season into that, I mean, that it'd take a big magic wand to make that happen. But, Bingham only played 15 minutes against Penn State. Izzo sat him down again to get through to him again. And we talked about this earlier in the show. Last week at this time, in the post-practice press briefing, Izzo mentioned, if Marcus Bingham plays like he practiced tonight, we'll be just fine, he'll be just fine. And then they went out against Indiana, second play of the game, scripted for Marcus Bingham to get a pick-and-pop three-pointer. That's Izzo, with some positive reinforcement, trying to bring Bingham along, patting him on the back when he does something right, and then if he goes back to his old ways, like he did against Penn State, sat him down, gave up a big putback with about 8 minutes to go to Jelani White. It wasn't even to Harrar. It was the guy coming off the bench. And Izzo took him out with 8 minutes to go, sat the rest of the game. Now, Marble had been playing really well to that point. Ended up with 14 points, 6 out of 7 from the field. And Marble puts forth games like this, on a semi-regular basis where he's got these 6 out of 7 type of games. And it's not just garbage points. You saw it. Everybody saw it, some face-up jumpers and so forth. But they rode Marble a lot late in that game to the point where Marble gave up a couple of big putbacks in the final 2 minutes. Sure, Harrar played more minutes than those guys did, and there's no reason that they shouldn't have been, that he should have been any fresher than Marble was, but Izzo thought that Marble was tired a little bit at the end of the game, not as effective as he was earlier in the game. That's when you need to have a team in which you do not have to discipline Bingham like that. To your point, you need to be able to rely on Bingham that he's going to go out there and play with an Andre Hudson level of focus and intensity, and you can bank on him doing all the proper things. Now, you touched on an interesting point with the block shots. He is excited about having the block shots record, and he knows how many he needs. And he's a fun guy.
He needs 4 more.
Yeah, he's a fun guy. He's having fun at practice today. He's a very good kid. Izzo would prefer to have some guys that weren't quite as nice. But the block shot thing, when you go hunting for block shots, he did it. Marble did it a little bit. If you think a guard is giving up some penetration, they thought that, Walker was giving up some penetration once and he didn't. They thought Hogard was giving up some penetration once and he didn't. But they're lurking around to block a shot. They end up giving up rebounding position in the process. Izzo has never been big on glorifying block shots for that reason. There's some programs that do emphasize the block shot. Jim Calhoun's UConn teams. Izzo's always been like, hey, if block shots come, that's fine. Rim protection is fine. But he wants defensive rebounding position foremost. They lost to Northwestern because of that, and they lost this game to Penn State because of allowing offensive rebounds. So with the Bingham thing, they got to get his mind straight, and that continues to be a work in progress for this team, Paul.
Yeah, one of the things that I saw from him early in that game is, I know that block shot thing's on his mind because I saw him leaving his feet on guys he didn't have to leave his feet against.
Yeah.
And that's what Marcus Bingham did earlier in his career when that was pretty much his calling card. He was like a block a minute type guy when he was getting like a handful of minutes, and he'd often leave his feet. And yeah, he'd have some nice blocks, but a lot of times he'd get burned. And in this game, I saw him leaving his feet. You're like, dude, why do you leave your feet? You've got that 7'6" wingspan. You've got a guy that's 6'5" trying to drive on you and put a shot up over you. You don't need to leave your feet. Mm-hmm. And I felt like he was hunting those shots. I felt like earlier in the season when it started, he's focused on playing ball screen defense and the blocks were coming. And I think, so he's got to get his mind right. And it's good that he has goals for himself, and it's good that he's chasing those goals. And I'd love for nothing more than to see him leave Michigan State with that record. That'd be awesome for him, just like it was for Xavier Tillman, who currently holds it. But he's got to do stuff within the scope of, what Michigan State does. And it's not just him. There's not one specific thing.
Right.
That's a silver bullet for this Michigan State team. But the two things that you can fix in that travel are, or that you can get better at. Maybe you're never going to be a great rebounding team, but you can get better at it. And it's not just the bigs. When we talk about rebounding, there's lots of times where you see guards leaking out, where they hadn't been doing that as much because they've been focused on going to the boards. But you see some guys leaving early, thinking that their teammates got clearing the board, and it ends up as an offensive rebound for Penn State or whatever. So it's not just Marcus Bingham, but defense and rebounding are the two areas that the program's been built on, that travel, that win you Big Ten championships. And Michigan State's got to get it figured out because it seems to, from the outside looking in, it probably seems like Michigan State's way out of the Big Ten race, but they're really not when you look at it. I mean, there's a lot of 4-loss teams in there. There's a couple, they got to win some games and they got some tough ones coming up, but, a lot of teams are taking it on the chin here and there. And, but to get this thing going where it needs to go, defense and rebounding. And then if you get that rebounding and defense figured out, and I think there were times against Penn State where the defense was fine and just there was some offensive rebounds, and that kind of screws everything up. But then you get the transition points. And if you're not clearing the glass, if you're not rebounding by a big margin, Michigan State's not going to get transition baskets, and that kills you in Big Ten play because Michigan State, as a system, as a program, they rely on transition baskets more, as much as anyone in the conference. And yeah, they want to be able to win a half-court game, but this is not. You have to have veteran, experienced, battle-tested guards and wings to do that, and Michigan State doesn't have that.
Mm-hmm. Transition game, we've not seen much of that in recent weeks. Teams in the Big Ten do a really good job getting back on defense against Michigan State.
But you can't force that transition game either. I felt like Tyson Walker, for example, a couple of times where they got defensive rebounds, they were trying to get out and run. They're trying to get that big break going like they had the first time against Penn State where I don't know what they had, 31 points in transition, 24, something like that. But you can't force it because these teams that got abused by you in transition the first time around, they learned their lesson. They know how to get back now, and they're going to do it. And Penn State has some grit, and they've got some veteran guards, and, they're a scrappy team.
They are scrappy.
Should Michigan State have won that game?
Yeah, and Penn State ran.
Yeah, they should have won.
Yeah. And Penn State ran some good stuff. I mean, they ran some stuff you had to hustle to cover, whether it be just some of the screen action or the handoff actions. And despite their record, Shrewsbury's done a good job of keeping those guys focused. Did a better job, like you said, transition defense. Ran some good stuff on offense. And then on defense, they were tuned into some of Michigan State's plays. Like there was that turnover that Tyson Walker had with about 3 minutes to go when Michigan State ran a wedge forward to the corner. They were trying to throw it out there to Malik Hall out in the corner, and it was intercepted. And you go back and watch it, and Penn State knows what's coming. And they also overplayed, like Michigan State, when they came out of the timeout and ran that 1-4. Ended up with Tyson Walker missing a three-pointer on the left wing, but they covered the first 2 or 3 actions of that play. They had it. They knew what Michigan State was doing. My point is, sign of a well-coached team, which I was not sure about with Penn State the first time Michigan State played. I could not believe how Penn State allowed Michigan State to get out and run like they did in that first game. I know Shrewsbury's a first-year coach, but he was an assistant at Purdue. He should have known better than that. And in terms of improvement coaching from game 1 to game 2, Penn State much improved from game 1 to game 2. They were into Michigan State's playbook, and they ran some good stuff on offense. And he has those guys still digging and playing hard. So Michigan State went on the road, thought they were going to beat this team that they blew out earlier in the year, got a double-digit lead, and it's a cliche, but they thought Penn State was done. Malik Hall said as much after practice today, or at least Julius Marble said as much after the game today, and Izzo said it also. We could always see it. We could all see it, and that's a cliche in sports. But it's rare for Michigan State to do that, to think that a game is over and play the scoreboard and disrespect an opponent. But that's exactly what they did, and that's exactly why Izzo wants better leadership, so it doesn't always have to be coming from the coach. But this one blew up on the Spartans big time. Now, Hauser has been shooting better, 2 out of 3 from three-point range in this game, and there's some growing confidence around him from his teammates and his coaches. Max Christie, 4 out of 11 from the field, 0 for 4 from three-point range. Had a great game, especially in the first half against Michigan. Since then and before that, it's been, pretty consistently, I don't want to say mediocre, but he's had trouble finding his mark. He had 4 field goals in this game. 3 of those field goals came on inbound plays. Michigan State trying to find different ways to get Max Christie some shots. They got him 3 shots on sideline and baseline inbound plays, which helped him get to 10 points. But Christie's still struggling to find his his rhythm and his range, and Gabe Brown 2 out of 8. Same thing with him. He's consistently inconsistent. What's your take on those two, Brown and Christie? Michigan State really cannot win without a couple of wings that can shoot traditionally.
Yeah, and I don't think that Max Christie can be a consistent player without Gabe Brown playing well. I think that it's like like sometimes in football you see a wide receiver that's struggling, and it's because he doesn't have guys around him that that can break the game open. I think that one of the reasons like Max Christie had some success early is because people were focused so much on stopping Gabe Brown because he was playing so well. I think the lack of strength if Gabe Brown's struggling and he's less of a threat, I think that's when you see really the lack of strength that Christie has against some of these more physically mature teams. You look at like the Northwestern, or you look at Penn State. They've got some guards, or Maryland or whatever. Maryland had some guards that have been around for a while, physically mature guys, and those are the kind of guys that I think Christie's having a hard time with. Like those super seniors or juniors, guys that have been in the weight room for a while. And, he's going to be like, if he had a year in the weight room or if this was his sophomore year instead of his freshman year, I think he'd be in a lot better place. But for him to do well, I think Gabe Brown needs to play a little bit better. And I feel like Gabe Brown, I think there's still times where I feel like he's just rushing his shot, and he doesn't need to. I think you'll figure it out. And I think there's times where he looks really good, but until he really kind of hits a stride again, I think it's going to be tougher for Max Christie. And Max Christie's going to go up and down. You see it all the time. Mm-hmm. But he's going to have moments where he looks really good, and and when if it's a half court game, if Michigan State's not scoring in transition, I think if they can get the break going, and we don't know if that's going to happen because the Big Ten teams really take that away. They always have. But those guys are guys that I think really gain a lot of confidence, really are pretty good in transition. And you'd like to see that happen. I'd like to see Gabe, instead of taking the quick three sometimes, go back to that, one dribble pull-up type stuff, maybe mid-range. I mean, Christie's doing mid-range stuff. That's great. And I think the three will come, but I think he needs a couple teammates. You got to have more than one perimeter scoring threat, for everything to work well. And, you don't have it with Hogard per se. I think Tyson Walker, he's done some nice things on the pull-up jumper. He's starting to take that. Yeah. He still isn't totally confident in when to take it over. Exactly. And there's a couple times he's passed up shots in the fast game. It's a work in progress. So if Gabe Brown's not hot and Tyson Walker's still learning, you need a combination of both those guys. You need Brown to get back to where he was, and you need Tyson Walker to start learning that balance of when to take shots and when to pass. At the same time, part of that balance, I think, is taking too many shots. We haven't seen that. We haven't really seen that from him, but I think he needs to do that. I think he needs to kind of push the envelope a little bit and then settle back down.
And you may have noticed Michigan State's second to last possession against Penn State, the one that ended with a shot clock violation. They ran a roll, replaced a Gabe Brown. He could have shot an NBA range three-pointer, turned it down. So that tells you a little bit about his confidence. And he passed it over to Malik Hall. Malik Hall had just given up a three-pointer to Lundy. Lundy had made a really tough shot at the shot clock buzzer, three-pointer that was a huge shot. Credit to him. Michigan State had just played really good defense for about 60 seconds because they played good defense and gave up an offensive rebound, played 30 more good minutes of defense. Lundy ends up with a circus shot, which was mammoth. A lot of times guys want to get it back, especially against the guy that's guarding you. So Gabe Brown turns down that NBA three, gives it to Hall in the corner, and Hall elects not to shoot, sends it inside the marble, makes the shot, but the shot clock expires. A lot of times I think it's a little bit overrated about whether you have or have not a go-to guy. In some instances, this team has had go-to plays from Malik Hall this year and from Max Christie sometimes. But Malik Hall there, 1 of 4 from the field for the day. Izzo just felt that Malik Hall just wasn't quite right that night. But that was one instance in which, like you said, Tyson Walker sometimes doesn't want to take it over. And earlier in that play, there was a chance where Walker could have looked for his shot at 16 feet. Also, one possession earlier when Michigan State was running a play, and they were going to. It was a 1-4 feed to Malik Hall at the elbow, and that kind of got messed up the geometry of that because Penn State saw it coming and they bumped it out, and then they were going to stagger to Gabe Brown, and that was covered. But Tyson Walker was like telegraphing it. His heart's in the right place. He really wants to go to Gabe Brown and defer to those guys. Penn State is really overplaying it. They're communicating. They know what play is coming, to their credit. You know, Tyson Walker's still a rookie in this program. He's an upperclassman in terms of basketball, his third year or whatever it is. But if they're overplaying everything to that right side of the court, I'm not asking him to be, you know, Cassius Winston or Mateen Cleaves or some of these All-Americans that they've had. But, you know, someone like a Trice would have crossed over to the left and gotten his own shot at the elbow because they were leaving that open. Like you said, Walker is not there to where he feels comfortable doing it. He has the ability to do it. He's more of a scorer than a passer, we've learned this year. But finding that balance of just playing, you know, some logical basketball things within your talents. He has the ability to deliver. These other guys do too. It's just a matter of getting it all stapled together. And that was a frustrating one for Michigan State fans to watch. I got a question right here from a guy named MSU Hunter, Paul. He says, this team may have tuned out Tom Izzo. They've blown leads several times against UConn, Penn State, Minnesota. Not all losses, but this team can't keep the foot on the gas, unquote. I wouldn't go that far, but your thoughts on this. Does Izzo still have a handle on this team?
Yeah, I mean, well, you could say that about. I mean, I could go through, like, I don't have schedules in front of me. I could go through UConn's schedule and say the same thing. I love that team. I love that UConn team. They've lost a lot of games they haven't. Yeah. They shouldn't either. You know, watching Xavier the other night and they lose to DePaul. I mean, this is conference. The thing that you got to understand is this is conference basketball. Teams know what you're going to run. And when you've got guys that have played Michigan State, you look at a Seth Lundy or someone like that, or these guys have played Penn State or played Michigan State, you know, like more than a half dozen times in some cases. They know what Michigan State runs. And you know, they're going up against a guy like Max Christie, who's probably, you know, knows less about what Michigan State runs than they do. Mm-hmm. And it's conference basketball. Teams, I mean, the Big Ten Conference is very, very good at you know, very, very good coaches all the way from top to bottom, and they do a very good job at making adjustments from game one to game two. You see that throughout college basketball, where teams lose games that maybe there's a big point spread or whatever. It's just that's what happens in conference basketball. I don't think anybody's tuned Tom Izzo out. I think it's impossible to tune him out.
Right.
Now, I think there's other questions you can ask,
and he's very good at knowing when he needs to back off and when he needs to come forward on things. And he spent a lot of this season not being the usual Tom Izzo. Now he's taking it up a notch in terms of really getting on guys in huddles and on the sideline. He spent most of the season not doing it. Now he's doing it. So yeah, I don't think they've tuned him out at all. They're trying to please him. They're trying to please him.
One of the questions I would ask, and I've thought about it on a handful of occasions, is, you know, has Tom Izzo, you know, I know people talk about recruiting talent and, oh, he's missed out on this guy and this guy and this guy. And I know, like, oh, they should have got this top 25 guy, this top 50 guy, and they didn't get him. I wonder sometimes if he's gone too much going for skill over you know, athleticism or physicality. You know, I think you need some of those John Chaney goons every once in a while. Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, like Michigan State's rebounding has not been Michigan State standard. And I think it's not just a will to. I think some of it's a physical type thing. You know, has Michigan State recruited the guys they need to recruit to rebound the way Michigan State needs to rebound? Mm-hmm. You know, I think of Baylor as a team that, you know, it seems like they've got a lot of those, like, kind of like 6'7", 6'8", 6'9".
Oh yeah.
Athletes, and that can go out and rebound and run, and they're not always the most skilled guys, but they develop within the program. I think UConn used to have a lot of those guys too. I think of guys like Raymar Morgan and stuff like that. I'm not saying. I think Michigan State's gone away from you know, those guys a little bit, and I think maybe they've overvalued skill a little bit too much in the recruiting process at times.
Yeah, you know, the game kind of changed just a little bit with the three-point shot and the shorter shot clock, and you saw, you know, the success Beeline was having and some other people, and I don't disagree with that. Michigan State kind of morphed in that direction a little bit more. You know, they could really, they're lacking the usual type of enforcer that they've had with some of their good teams. And Julius Marble, from a physical standpoint, should and could be able to deliver that. He's still working to become that. It took a lot of years to get some ruggedness out of Goran Sutan, for example, or Drew Namick, for example, and Paul Davis. You know,
but Marble's a guy that when they recruited him, they thought physically that he would be able to rebound like a Xavier Tillman.
Right.
Now Marble's not a guy that's a natural rebounder. You know, I love what he does, and he wants to. And I thought he had, in many ways, I thought that was one of his most impressive games from an all-around standpoint, because I think he did challenge some guys on defense when he was fresh. He did rebound well. I mean, he had some range rebounds that he wouldn't have gotten in years past. But, you know, there's not a guy there's not a guy on the roster like a Kenny Goins or Xavier Tillman where you know that he can go out and get you double-digit rebounds on a night where you know Michigan State needs double-digit rebounds.
Now let me stop you right there. Now think about the junior version of Kenny Goins and maybe the sophomore version of Tillman. Those guys were works in progress for a long time also.
Yeah, but they could also always rebound. They were works in progress in a lot of ways, but they could rebound. You think of the Kenny Goins game where he had 16 against Louisville as a sophomore.
Yeah.
You know, Xavier Tillman, you know, they weren't polished in a lot of ways, and Xavier Tillman basically until the second half of his senior season, well, you know, would pass down a lot of shots in the post that you just want him to take. You know, dude, you got to match up against a 6'3" guard, and you're not going for that jump hook. But the thing that they could do, both of those guys could board, and you know, and Michigan State needs a guy like that. They could use a rebounder right now.
Mm-hmm. You think about like Brandon Dawson, and it took a while to get him tuned in also, but when he was on his game, he was just a pain in the rear end to play against if you're an opponent.
But even when he wasn't tuned in, he could rebound. Mm-hmm. You look at, you know, Raymar Morgan, you know, everyone wanted him to be the tree man or the wing. Yeah. He was never going to be that guy, but he was always a guy that fought, and he could give you 8 or 9 rebounds and play good defense. That's what I see. I see that as kind of a missing piece right now. Michigan State doesn't have one of those guys, and they could use that guy.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, Gabe Brown was trying to deliver an offensive rebound when he missed that three-pointer. It was during an 8-0 run for Penn State after Michigan State had built their 13 or 14-point lead. Penn State answered with 8 straight. They got a three-pointer in transition. Gabe Brown missed a three-pointer and fouled his own shot. Fouled it, did not get the offensive rebound. Marble tried to get it also, but Harrar ended up getting the offensive rebound. Now it's a 4-on-3. They get an open three-pointer in the corner. They make it. It's an 8-0 run. Helps Penn State stay in the game, get back in the game. Gabe Brown went to the offensive glass on that occasion to get it. It wasn't really 4 to the boards. It was 2 to the boards. You know, I'd have to go back to see where Christie or Akins were at that point and where Hall or Hauser were. Those guys are not playing 35 minutes a game. It's designed for players to play 22 minutes so that they're giving tireless effort on the offensive glass and tireless effort in transition. And that's still the way it's built, but they're not quite getting that. They're not getting those, you know, staples of the program to work for them. If there's an area of improvement around the corner, Paul, where do you see optimism? I'm looking at someone like Hogard. Hogard, he practiced today. Izzo says he's fine. His assist to turnover trend right now is outstanding. 5 assists, 0 turnovers against Penn State. He's something like 23-7 in his last 4 or 5 games. That shot's probably never going to quite come around for him this year, but I suspect he would have been quarterbacking that team in the late going. Now, Tyson Walker came in, made a couple nice shots, but then failed to deliver some nice passes late in the game when they really needed it. So they don't have the all-around point guard that they need. But I think Hogard is improving, and I think if he continues to improve, that would help a lot.
Yeah, I think. But the thing with Hogard is we see a great game, and then the next one's as a clunker. He's got to have that. To borrow Mel Tucker phrase, the consistency in performance. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the thing that he needs to work on. And I think that, Hogard is a positive, but, I want to see him continue to get better on defense, get more consistent on defense. I think he's doing a good job with assisted turnovers. I do think there's times where, of like lasered in and I'm going to drive, and he doesn't see. I think he could have even more assists, to be honest with you. The guy that I do think I think overall, it's not just Hoger, but I think there's some overall promise at the point guard position. I do think Tyson Walker is going to get there where he balances his offense with running the team. And I just think that
his passing has gone a little haywire. Have you noticed that? Walker?
Yeah, I think it has. I think he's trying to push it. I think his passing is not great, but I also think that Michigan State's making it too easy to defend their stuff. I don't feel like Michigan State's screening well. I don't feel like the wings. I don't feel like a lot of times the wings are running the way they should. There's a lot of things that I think need ironing out. But I do think that the point guard position, I don't think it's something we're going to see as like a night and day improvement. But I think there's progress being made by both those guys. I think Walker, I think he's got to have a good assist game. And I think for that to happen, I think Michigan State's got to get a game where they get some transition buckets. But I think him starting to get a feel for his shooting, I think that's a good thing. I don't know. It's hard to say one thing and say, hey, this is. I can tell you a number of things that have to change or that need work. It's hard to see a real breakthrough without guys playing consistent basketball. I think one of the things that I'd be focusing on with a lot of guys, Malik Hall being one of them, it's consistency and performance. Okay, yeah, you did a great job, and yeah, you had like 16 points in this game, but you're at this stage, you've got to do it game after game after game. You can't have one great game and take another off. And they might not have a go-to guy on this team, but they have to have a group of guys that can be collectively depended upon, like a Malik Hall. Yeah, you might not be giving us 20 points on this night, but I need a solid 10 from you. Gabe Brown, you might not be giving us 16 points, but your basement has to be way higher than it is. You can't have a night where you only score 4 points.
No.
Or Max Christie. You might be averaging 10 points, but you can't give me a 2-point night. You got to have solid consistency and performance, and that's the sign of an immature team. I don't know if it's a lack of leadership. I think a lot of it's a maturity, and these guys need to grow up.
Or are they just limited? Is Gabe Brown limited? Coming into this year, I thought that he was a streak shooter. Earlier in the year, I thought that he was shedding that. I thought he was becoming a guy that would consistently, go 3 of 7 from 3-point range in a game, which is a good, effective, productive percentage. But then now we've seen a string of 0 for 5s and 1 for 5s, aside from that game when he went off against Rutgers. So he is a streak shooter. That's the definition of a streak shooter. Matt McQuaid was a streak shooter for 3 years.
Yeah.
For 3 years.
That's
Then as a senior, he became a solid every game 40% 3-point shooter. That's where I thought Gabe Brown could be.
Matt McQuaid really didn't shed that streakiness until the first third of the Big Ten play was over. I mean, we were having the same conversation in the podcast about Matt McQuaid that we're having about Gabe Brown. He eventually stepped up, and we remember Matt McQuaid being super clutch because he was, down the stretch. But he was having his up and down games like Gabe Brown was until that second half of the Big Ten season.
So sometimes,
it's a process with some guys.
Sometimes we remember guys at the end of their career when they were stars, and we forget how much Sutan struggled earlier in his career. He became most outstanding player of the tournament. Trice became most outstanding player of the Eastern region in 2015, going to the Final Four. What they were at the end of their career: Kenny Goins, Tillman, Sutan, Trice, McQuaid. It happens, and sometimes
Brent
it happens.
Forbes.
Yeah, and sometimes it happens from this point in the season onward, and that's what Izzo's searching for. Max Christie, freshman, he's playing. I'd have to look to see what Miles Bridges averaged a few years ago, but Izzo, I don't think Izzo's ever had a freshman average 31 minutes a game. Izzo was asked earlier in this week, has Max Christie hit a wall? The proverbial freshman wall, and Izzo said, yes, I think he has. And they're working on it. I think you might see more medium-range shots from him in the near future as they try to get him dialed back in. But he's a guy that if he gets refreshed later in the year or here soon, he could look a lot different. Gabe Brown is the guy that needs to hit that Matt McQuaid gear somehow, some way. Joey Hauser needs to find some of that Sutan, Kenny Goins, even freshman year Lorbeck, March magic. It's possible coming off the bench. And Malik Hall needs to continue to embrace his role as a guy that they look to take that shot. He passed up that shot in the corner on that shot clock violation. He's been a guy that's been unafraid to take some of those shots. Kenny Goins was always unafraid to take those shots. Malik Hall is still above 50% from three-point range for the year, which is a big plus for this season, an unexpected plus. I'm sure they told him you need to let that fire. I know that Dredd was in the area and he's 6'4" and a pretty good defender, but Malik Hall can get that shot off, and he needs to know that everybody's got his back. That he's their best hope when that shot clock is at 2, and Gabe Brown passes up an NBA 3 to give it to Malik Hall. Some continued growth could come there from Malik Hall, who's still, getting accustomed to this role with this team. He said a week or so ago he's never been the go-to guy on any team, so he's still getting accustomed to that. So this could still happen. You could still get some late season growth with these guys, and that's what Izzo's banking on, and he's pretty good at getting that sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, the big key for Michigan State, I think that some of that stuff will come around, but the ceiling of this team is going to be determined on whether they can get the rebounding and the defense taken care of. And the defense, I think, is pretty solid, but it's really hard to play 2 defensive possessions. I mean, that's where Michigan – so it really comes down, in my opinion, to rebounding. And that's my biggest question mark with the team is, can they rebound at a level they need to get the transition game going, to limit the number of times, the amount of defense they're playing.
Max Christie was 1 of 8 against Illinois when they lost to the Illini 56-55 on January 25th. Max Christie back in his home state of Illinois. He's going to be charged up to try to get some retribution there. Maybe that'll help jumpstart him. In that game, Luke Goody, 3 of 4 from three-point range for Illinois. The other thing is Frazier will be playing defense against Christie, which is not an easy thing. So even more reason for Gabe Brown to come to the forefront. Anything else heading into this game against Illinois before we let you go, Paul? What's on your mind, Michigan State basketball heading into this big weekend?
Yeah, I think Michigan State's going to get some better shots than maybe people realize against Illinois, because I do think that, Kobe Coburn does shot. His ball screen defense isn't very good. I think Michigan State will get some open shots. It's a matter of making it. And we saw Michigan State last year, rise to the occasion again in some of these big games. Michigan State needs to this year. The difference between this year and last year is Michigan State, I think, without question, I think Michigan State's team is better this year than they were last year. But they don't have that Aaron Henry guy that you can ride. And they've had that guy on occasion, but who's going to show up and who's going to be that guy? I think consistency and performance is going to be the biggest thing, from now until the end of the season. And for that to happen, Gabe Brown, Malik Hall, Marcus Bingham, those guys need to play like they're old, because they are.
I agree with you. It'll be interesting to watch. Big one against Illinois. Schedule gets really tough right now. Got Illinois coming up, Purdue. Got to go to Iowa. Michigan won at Iowa today. Michigan State has to go to Michigan in a couple of weeks, at the beginning of March. Tough games coming up, but Michigan State played tough at this time last year with a different band of troops. But Izzo's going to try to wring some quality basketball guys out of these guys coming down the stretch. Paul, I really appreciate you joining SpartanMag Live tonight. I'll be talking to you soon. You take care, all right?
All right, take care. Thank you.
There he goes. Paul Konerdijk, appreciate him joining us. SpartanMag Live, we're going to turn the phone lines on here in a minute, but first of all, let's see. Keegan Murray was 9 out of 23 from the field today against Michigan, so I don't know if Michigan played really good defense or if Keegan Murray had an off night. Got a note on that one from a friend of mine. Anyway, getting back to the question, Dan from Denver, he's asking, does name, image, and likeness with no salary cap have the potential to ruin college football? I talked about that a moment ago. As far as the gap goes, one point I would make is that, the gap, I don't know if you could get a bigger gap than we've seen with Alabama, Georgia, maybe Ohio State, Clemson here in the last few years. I don't know how name, image, and likeness is going to end up with two programs getting a bigger piece of the 4-star pie and 5-star pie than Alabama and Georgia have right now. I heard someone talking about it today that Alabama and Georgia combined had like 75 top 250 players, and the rest of the country combined only had 75 top 250 players on the roster. So I don't know how name, image, and likeness is going to end up with anybody having a greater gap than that. The gap is going to remain something like that. Maybe it flattens it out a little bit at the top, but the power programs could change a little bit. Like I said, maybe not Clemson. A&M is going to be hard to outspend them. Whether or not they get their coaching together to the point where they can capitalize on their name, image, and likeness advantages remains to be seen, because A&M has never capitalized on their resources. But they are the proverbial sleeping giant. Question number 5, Spartan Roxy says, thanks, Jim. Your breakdown on the Penn State collapse was great. That's an article I wrote over at SpartanMag.com. He says, is there an easy fix for the basketball team, or is the talent simply not there to execute what's needed to win? It gets back to what I was saying earlier. Even with, talent-wise, it's an okay talented team. Not as talented as some of those Bridges Winston teams that were 1 and done, 2 and done. And then the Winston team went to the Final Four. It was great his junior year, of course. But you got to get that defense focus and passion back. They lacked focus and passion in that Penn State game. That's what got them. Leadership, can anything come around there? I'm not sure. I think Hogard could improve here in the next 4 weeks. Like we're talking about with Konendijk, Izzo has had guys in the last 4 weeks, 5 weeks, find another gear. Talked about Travis Trice in 2015. Lorbeck as a freshman. Draymond Green in 2009 as a sophomore coming off the bench was a new player. Nobody thought Draymond Green would be an NBA player, much less an NBA All-Star, much less an Olympic gold medalist when you looked at him as a sophomore. But he consistently started making progress and ended up playing 29 minutes in those NCAA tournament games on the way to the Final Four in 2009. But that happened in the last half of that year. Travis Walton in the last half of 2009 had always been kind of a journeyman, but really hit another stride. So did Suton. And now Walton and Suton were very experienced. Michigan State, they've got some experience there with Bingham and Brown, but different types of personalities. But anyway, I just wouldn't close the book on Michigan State right now. Izzo is hard at work, and he's nicely, constructively grouchy right now. We saw him at practice. He had a little confab with the media after practice today and about some off-the-record stuff. And he is getting geared toward March mode. Don't know if it's going to work this year, but it's worked in the past, and I wouldn't bet against him. Also, a lot was made publicly about Michigan State closing the locker room to interviews after the Penn State game on Tuesday, and in 27 years of coaching, Izzo, I don't remember him doing it, but I think he said he may have done it 2 or 3 times for various reasons. I don't remember it ever happening. Izzo talked a little bit about that today, a little bit off the record, just leveling with us on why he did it, and he just said that it was a sullen locker room after the game, and he just wanted to get out of town, close up shop, get on the plane, get out of town. You may have heard his radio interview. It only lasted about 2 minutes. He was into his post-game press conference almost immediately, and that thing was done in 6 or 7 minutes, and he was out of town. He wanted to. It's almost like in 2005 when they lost in very ugly fashion to Iowa in the Big Ten tournament. He famously took a sledgehammer to the compact discs, video discs, and VCR tapes. They were still using tapes back then, I think. On a very good article by Bob Wojnowski, who was there with the team. He was embedded there at the outset of that tournament run. And Izzo took a sledgehammer, and he said he had the team in for video film study after the Iowa game, and he said, "Here's our film study day," and he just beat the hell out of some videotapes. So he wanted to move on. So Izzo wanted to move on, get out of Penn State, get back home, and keep the guys fresh and just get back and go to class the next day and just get on with it. So that's why he did it. And he just kind of leveled with us on that one. Connor from Chicago says, we'll get to that one in a moment. Let's go over here to the comments and reactions and over here in the live chat area. Appreciate everybody joining us here at Spartan Mag Live on a Thursday night. Rob South says, what's up, fellas? It's good to have Rob South checking in first. Speaking of which, it's snowing down in East Lansing, so let's go ahead and do this. That's the way it looks over. That's the way to look over the Beaumont Tower tomorrow. Spartan MD says, yo. Mr. Bowman says, hello, comp. Brian V says, sup. Mark Carrier, in there like swimwear. I'm not sure I've ever heard that one before. That's our starting lineup. Rob South running the point. Spartan MD, he's the doctor. He's on the wing. He's a threat. Off the dribble, above the rim, everywhere. Spartan MD, Mr. Boneman at the 2 guard. Brian V, he's a stretch 4. Mark Carrier, he's an undersized 5 down there, in there like swimwear. Eric M says, let's go. What's up, everyone? Checking in from Roswell, Georgia. Old Tuck, the bell cow from Austin, Texas. Rob South says, they already canceled my kid's school. Party at Rob South's house tonight. Steve S. Happy Friday Eve. It is Friday Eve, Steve S. Friday Eve. Spartan MD, the doctor from snowy West Bloomfield. Mr. Bowman, it's an orange and honey tea kind of night. Very cold in Harper Woods. Orange and honey tea. You're not going to sneak a little whiskey in there, are you? I'd recommend it. Old Tuck says, where is Izzo on the retirement meter? He says, losses don't seem to piss him off as much. Coach K went white on the bench last night. Retirement meter, Izzo's not planning on it. I mean, he's always like perpetually 5 years away from retirement. Could it happen overnight like it did with D'Antonio? Possibly. But Izzo's bent on a lot of things. And the COVID thing actually energized him. The year and a half that threw Izzo off of the usual coaching routine energized him. And he was pretty energized last summer and coming into this season. And now he's getting a little snarl back. We'll see what happens. Shadi says, hi, Comp. I seriously look forward to Thursdays to watch your broadcast. Appreciate that, Shadi Elasadi. Appreciate your support. Gordon Tonona says he's here. So Gordon Tonona is present. Might be a little tardy, but his attendance is close to perfect. Old Tuck from Ludington, a Ludington Oriole, says, when was the last time you saw Izzo struggle to will a team forward this late into the season? Struggling to reach them. I would agree with you on that. When's the last time it's happened? Some of those teams, they didn't end up very good, but some of those teams did not have good kids necessarily. He loves these kids, but he's having trouble reaching them, and he's frustrated by it. We talked about that earlier in the show, that he was shocked, as he said, that the ground that they made in terms of passion, toughness, physicality in the Indiana game did not carry over to Penn State to the point where the pilot light flickered a little bit and guys lost focus like they're playing for the Sacramento Kings on a Tuesday night in February in the second quarter. Can't have that in the Big Ten on the road, especially if you're not that talented of a team, especially if your defensive rebounding is not there every night like it's supposed to be. So he is struggling to reach this team in some ways, and he's baffled by it because he has good kids. They sit there, they listen to him, they nod, they want to do well, then they go out and they fog out a little bit. And he says, leadership, I've talked about this 3 times tonight, because he was talking about it after practice today. The leadership thing the lack of leadership thing really showed itself at Penn State when that thing started to unravel. There was nobody taking over the huddles. Sometimes he sits back and waits for somebody to do it, and they weren't. I thought A.J. Hoggard might be making progress in that area when he lit into Matty Sissoko, when Matty Sissoko didn't carry out a play that they called. He didn't go where he was supposed to. I think Sissoko was supposed to go up and set a ball screen, and he stayed in the low block area, and it threw off the play turnover. Hoggard got on him, which Izzo likes. So I'm a little surprised that Hoggard maybe didn't take over some of those huddles, but maybe the twisted ankle prevented him from doing it. Just watching it and having been at practice, I think Hoggard has the capacity to be that type of bark leader. I thought Malik Hall had it. I thought he showed it in practice earlier in the year. Now Malik's getting a little more quiet. He needs to come out of that and find some leadership energy there. But to your point, yeah, Izzo is having trouble reaching this team, but you know how Izzo always says it needs to be a player-coach team and not a coach-coach team. If the coach has to do it, might not be as effective, but he will do it and he will get it done. You may see him, or he will attempt to get it done if it's not being done for him. You may have noticed that Izzo is getting a lot more riled up on the sideline than he was for the first 20 games of the season. MJ says, as always, MJ says, football first, please. Spartan MD says, any SpartanMag swag for sale. MJ wanted Big Movie to call too. We'll get Big Movie back maybe next week. All right, what else we have? Yeah, I got it. It's not Bib Movie. It's a Big Movie. 3 hours. My goodness, love it. Poke Kid 92 says, glad you guys like the Michigan State talk here. Douglas Klein. Did I miss a question for them? Douglas Klein. Appreciate your personal sponsorship, Douglas Klein, for sure. Appreciate what you do, giving us a little something in the tip jar. Appreciate the heck out of that. Douglas Klein's asking, who's the next D-line commitment? DePape is the guy from Iowa that committed a couple weeks ago. National top 250. Big-time commitment for Michigan State out of Iowa. A lot of ability on that guy, but like I said 2 weeks ago, a guy that needs to continue to work. He's a worker, but I'll think of the way to phrase it. He's got to, I don't know, I'm diplomatically trying to say something, but he's got to keep working, and he's recruiting a lot of guys on the internet, on social media, like Douglas says. Needs to be an all-around player, all-around teammate, all those things. You know, as far as others, you know, the next guy to commit, you know, there's been some talk about Eno Etta. He's a 4-star from Colleyville, Texas, Covenant Christian, number 213 in the country. We've talked about him in past weeks. Reminds me of Will Golston a little bit. He seems to like Michigan State a lot. And with Brandon Jordan, the new defensive line coach, defensive ends coach, that's why they got DePape out of Iowa. And they're going to continue to resonate with some of these guys. You know, the kid from Detroit King, he's going to be right in there. I think Michigan State's been doing really well with him for a long time. I would think those would be the two. Those are the ones that are getting a lot of. Thompson is the kid's name, Jaden Thompson. Thompson and Etta would be the most likely. You're asking for D-line commitments. A couple of 4-stars, and Thompson's a top 5 guy in the state. Those would be nice additions. All right. John Coonan says, make shots. It's that simple. Make shots. I do not disagree with that. I'm not always a guy that talks about it being a shot-making league like the NBA. It's a make-shot, miss-shot league. College basketball may be becoming a little bit more of that, but you can't have a cold shooting night. But what separates the good from the really good is team defense, and Michigan State's got to get that down too. But Gordon Sonona says, we need an alpha dog. I think Max Christie can become that, but he's still finding his way. Spartan MD says, wrong answers, Imani Bates. By the way, Imani Bates leaves Memphis. I don't know if he's left them for good, but he's been on the sideline for a couple weeks, and all of a sudden Memphis is playing better basketball. MJ says, how about never play Bingham? That's not very nice. You need Bingham. Bingham earlier in the year, like Konradike was saying earlier, his ball screen defense was good. He was like a spider out there in ball screen defense. Quickness, but can't be giving up those putbacks. It needs to stay focused in. And Izzo's trying to reach him because he's very important. X Buckets for Life says, we have to win Saturday and Tuesday. He's talking about playing against Illinois and Iowa. Have to win those games. Must win games to stay in the Big Ten race also. But just to get their basketball soul right again. Yeah, they're one game out in the loss column. As Heathcote would say, forget about the Big Ten race. Need to get back in the human race. I don't know if they're that low right now, but another couple of losses, then they will need to get back in the human race. Richard Kustas says 3 hours, 3 times a week. That would be something. Gordon Tonona with some theater of the mind about the lady that accidentally called from Mississippi a few months back. That was interesting. I forgot about that. Bone Man does not remember that. Probably best that he does not remember that. We don't need Bone Man theater of the mind with a girl from Mississippi, do we? That's not going to help anybody. How about this one? What do we have here? $10 Tommy says, what's the prediction for the rest of the year? I think they implode and end up 10-10 in the Big Ten. All right, what is Michigan State right now in the Big Ten? They're 9-5. So they've got, 6 games left. So you think they're going to go 1-5 the rest of the way? I mean, that's possible. That's possible. Those last 3 games, or those last 6 games, I've been saying all week, if I'm a Michigan State guy and I was offered 3-3, I would take it in these last 6 games. At Michigan, at Iowa, at Ohio State, and at home you've got Purdue, Illinois, and Maryland. I mean, beating Maryland on senior day is probably going to happen, right? Michigan's playing well. That's becoming an increasingly problematic game for Michigan State if Michigan State doesn't change some things. MSU Hunter checking in from Wisconsin. Spartan basketball, so frustrating to follow. No leadership and getting very little from the seniors, Brown, Hauser, and Bingham. Well, when you lose to Penn State and you only score 58 points or whatever it is, they weren't getting much from anybody, right? Hauser made a couple threes. Decent role play out of him. Marble, nice role play out of him off the bench. But they did some good things to build that lead. But you saw what happened. Kind of peeking over the press box here on a snowy day at Spartan Stadium. $10 Tommy says, shake up the starting lineup. Start Atkins and Brooks on Saturday. Akins wants to start Akins and Brooks on Saturday. You might get the turnover problem revisited. Appreciate your opinion on that one, but I'm not sure that's the answer. But Izzo was talking about that today. That he was talking about he was mentioning what I mentioned also, that sometimes guys come on strong late in the year, freshmen. So Pierre Brooks, I think, has the capacity to help more than he has. He's been like a 2-minute-a-game guy. He could be like a 6-7-minute game guy. Corey Lucius, his freshman year, I think it was 2010. No, it was 29 when he was a freshman. Hit that big 3 at the end of the first half against Louisville in the regional final. He was a 4-minute-a-game guy. Brooks, I think he's lost a little bit of weight. He's looking a little better. He was jumping better today in practice. And he can shoot. He can score. Got to move well on defense. Had a couple turnovers in that game. What game was it? It wasn't the Indiana game. Was it the Indiana game? I don't know. Tyson Walker, I think, is the guy that he's in a funk in terms of passing the ball right now. And that's been a little bit of a surprise to me. I thought he was going to be a slick distributor, playmaker, but he's kind of having problems making passes and finding where he fits. But when he goes and looks for a shot, you see some skill there for sure. He's got to find his way around the court within the system because there's more there for him also. Connor from Chicago says, with Scotty Hazelton focusing on linebackers, would you expect that to favor us in recruiting? It's a private call. Yeah, we talked a little bit. I hinted at that last week, and I think it's out on the internet a little bit. But yeah, Ross Ells, special teams coordinator, might not be linebackers coach here in the offseason. There's some scuttlebutt out there. Michigan State has not confirmed that, but that's what I'm expecting. Hazelton, and it's Hazelton's defense. He's got to get it squared away and make sure that things are done the way he needs them to be done, because this is it's a results business, especially with Mel Tucker at the helm. So Connor's asking, with Hazelton taking over linebackers, would I expect that to favor Michigan State in recruiting? And which linebackers would I realistically think Michigan State could get? Any real shot at Jaden Asbury, Jordan Hall, or Tackett Curtis? No, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what impact that's going to have on linebacker recruiting. Hazelton, he's a coordinator. He's not. A lot of programs have one coordinator that doesn't do much recruiting, just focuses on X's and O's. Hazelton does some recruiting here and there. Maybe Hazelton can correct me on this, but I'm not sure that's his jam a whole lot. And he can correct me on that if he wants to reach out to me. But no, I wouldn't expect that to have a big impact on linebacker recruiting. But overall, Tucker's involved with a lot of guys. And when they're on campus, Hazelton is good. But in terms of being out and about and really getting things done, maybe he'll prove me wrong. Maybe he can really hit some pots and pans together and create a positive disturbance in recruiting this year. But just not, because I just Not sure about that one. But as far as Curtis goes, Tackett Curtis, I mean, these are big timers. I mean, Tackett Curtis is number 41 in the nation from Louisiana, and Asbury's number 39 in the nation from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I mean, you're talking about a couple of national top 50 guys from Louisiana. Michigan State having a shot with them. Well, I mean, you've got I've never covered a team that has had a Brandon Jordan out there recruiting with what he's done in that part of the country and the impact he's had and the way NFL people love him as someone who develops talent. So if I take my old Michigan State viewpoint construct and apply it to this, I'd say there's no way Michigan State's going to go down to Louisiana and get a couple of top 50 guys. Historically. Wouldn't even try. Wouldn't even bother with it. But Mel Tucker, that's where Mel Tucker getting some of that talk down in Louisiana about potentially being an LSU candidate back when really nothing was going on there, but that created some headlines in that state. They go 11-2, win the Peach Bowl. Brandon Jordan, originally from Louisiana, set up shop in Houston. So these are variables that Michigan State has not had since I've been covering them, going back a third of a century. So I'm taking some old Michigan State limitations and applying them to the current staff. That's personal foul on me. So realistically, I'm still learning as we go on this. I wouldn't think so. I wouldn't think Michigan State would be able to go down there and do that. But Michigan State's lighting up the end, name, image, and likeness, just like the other ones down south are going to do. So getting both those guys, probably not. But can they go after 10 of those types and get one or two, which never would have happened before? Yeah, I think that's possible. Sparta is posting from 30,000 feet over Atlanta on his way to Florida. He says, what are the odds that Michigan State adds a starting caliber offensive line transfer this year? Would 2 offensive line transfers surprise you? The chances of a starting caliber offensive line transfer. Well, if they're going to get a transfer, it's going to be someone that they think can be a starter. Now, I know that most of last year's transfers did not start, but Jarrett Horst did. If you're going to get a transfer on the offensive line, it's going to be a guy that's going to want to come in and help right away. Michigan State's been in on Brian Green, the center from Washington State. He's visiting Michigan State, Virginia, and Arizona State in March. 6'3", 2020 was honorable mention, all Pac-12. Only played 7 games this year, had some injuries. A good solid center. If you look at his Pro Football Focus grades, his grades are somewhere, in pass blocking. He's like a Matt Allen, J.D. Duplain, Kevin Jarvis type of guy. The way he grades out by PFF, which is not the end-all, be-all, but it's something to look at. And his run blocking is like a Matt Allen, Jarrett Horst, J.D. Duplain. So he's not like going to be a guy that would come in and be a world beater. However, he was honorable mention All Pac-12 2 years ago, if Michigan State can get him. That's a center. He'll be competing with Samac. Samac is working really hard right now in winter conditioning. Michigan State put out some video earlier this week of some of the winter conditioning that's going on. Samac was in there, and they rewarded him by shouting him out on social a little bit. So Samac's in there battling, and they need Samac to take it up a notch. A lot of people expected Samac to beat out Matt Allen for that starting job this year or last year. Well, this year anyway, didn't get done. Last year, Matt Allen was in there but was injured. So Samac has kind of plateaued a little bit. He needs to have a big spring. Green, if Michigan State can get him, he'd come in and compete with him in the summer. I think there's a chance Michigan State could get 2 offensive line portal transfers. They've got their eyes and ears open on that one, and they're hunting it down. All right, Pete from Atlanta. He says, I asked this last week as well. He says, I understand since about 2015, Power 5 scholarships are for 4 years. Power 5? First of all, Power 5 and the rest, and Group of 8, Group of 5, and mid-majors all the way down to New Mexico State and Kent State, they all have the same scholarship rules. All right. Power 5 scholarships are for 4 years if you get a full ride as an incoming freshman, he says. Is that the case? 4 years? All right, here's the rest of the question. If so, have you heard of any players that were encouraged to leave? Again, the question is, he says it's his understanding that if you get a full ride as an incoming freshman, you get 4 years. No, that's not the case. in the past, I don't know how it's written, but I think it's pretty much a 1-year deal. And it used to be, was it Big Ten? I'm not 100% sure on that. I'm not sure what the rules are. But the point is, you're saying, have you heard of any players that were encouraged to leave but responded, thanks, coach, for the input, but I think I'll stay here the rest of my career, rest of my scholarship, unquote. Pete in Atlanta says, it's my understanding is a school cannot terminate the scholarship for athletic performance, would need to be something like academics, getting in trouble, skipping practices, etc. He says, your insight and clarification would be greatly appreciated. All right, Pete, thanks for the post. I'm not sure how the rule is written. Any way you slice it, there's a lot of programs out there that are forcing players out to clear scholarship room. I don't know what the rules say, but that's going on. There's a lot of pressure out there. It's always been a big business, and now it's a bigger business than it's ever been. It's basically semi-pro, and these coaches used to have 5 years to build. Now they might get a year and a half to build a program. So they're not waiting around with guys on scholarship for 5 years. They got to clean it and move on. I'm not saying I like it. I'm just saying that's the way it is. Question number 9, MSU 777 from New Hudson, Michigan says, Jalen Hunt, defensive tackle for Michigan State, he says, received quite a bit of hype, yet did not produce much and apparently suffered from injuries this past season. Is he behind Slade and Barrow and maybe even behind Hansen and Mallory? Or do you have higher expectations for him this coming year? Even Harmon could step up. What would your defensive tackle depth chart look like for 2022? Good question. Jalen Hunt was really hyped up as a freshman. D'Antonio really liked him early on. He was a 4-star guy coming out of Belleville, I think it was. Looked good early on, had a lot to learn, and still trying to gain traction in that regard. This year, Hunt was a little bit of a disappointment in terms of limited playing time, and I think he was a little antsy about it. The coaching change on the defensive line pretty much helped keep him around and some others. And but you look at what he did this year. Jalen Hunt had 171 snaps. I went back and charted the snaps here. Derek Harmon had 39 snaps. Kyle King had 48 snaps transferred out. Derek Harmon, they're really high on him. A lot of size, has some movement. They think he's got a great future. Got on the field as a true freshman this year. Kyle King, I think, was a junior. Maybe a redshirt sophomore. Jalen Hunt, redshirt sophomore, I think. All right, Deshaun Mallory, 260 snaps. Mallory got on the field. I'd have to look up what his stats were. Well, the previous year, there was only 7 games played. But Mallory, a big, rotund individual that had been up around 350, lost like 80 pounds to get down to like 280 or something like that. And he was looking a lot better and a lot different, but the lighter weight, he was not as effective. Was quick, but not. If you're going to be 280 at defensive tackle, you better be really quick. And he was just quick. So a guy that naturally, I don't want to say naturally, but carried 360 somewhat comfortably in the past. 280, then they got into football camp, pads went out in August, and they started wanting to put weight back on him. In other words, they realized that he was not holding the point like he could when he was bigger. So I would not be shocked if Mallory comes back on the plus side of 300. Hit in spring practice, he might look like a different player then. So Mallory's an interesting X factor. So Mallory had 260 snaps. Jalen Hunt had 171. Derek Harmon, 39. On the top end of that, Jacob Slade was 6'13", had a really good season. Played through some bumps and bangs and ows and minor injuries. And Slade was a difference maker in the first 6, 7, 8 games of the year. Bowl game, difference maker again. Slade's really become a plus player. And where did you first hear about Jacob Slade? Where? SpartanMag.com. He was like a 2-star, maybe a no-star. I went down to one of those t-shirt camps in Ohio, and I was like, who is that dude that's out here like Drago from the Rocky movies, just destroying people? I kept looking. He's making plays. I'm like, that dude has, talk about relentless. Slade, just keep quick beating. Then I realized there was 2 of them. They were twins. Still, I mean, they were both really good. And I talked to them a little bit and asked them who they've been hearing from. They weren't hearing from anybody at that time. Cincinnati a little bit. Then Michigan State got in on them. They had a good senior year. Michigan State got them. But nobody was pointing me in that direction on that one. I just went to a camp, and I was like, those dudes look pretty good. And Slade, good, solid defensive tackle. All Big Ten material for next year. 613 snaps this season. Productive member of that pass rush. And he's a good pass rusher, defensive tackle. I was talking to Mooby about that a little bit. And he says these days in football, a pass rushing defensive tackle is the most valuable commodity you can have on the defensive side of the ball, even more so than an edge rusher. An edge rusher is supposed to be an edge rusher. But if you get a guy that can play the run and command double team attention in run defense and just beat people in the pass rush like Aaron Donald, then that's like, to use a baseball, do people still watch baseball? That's like getting a really good defensive catcher who can also hit 45 home runs. I mean, you get a defensive catcher to be a defensive catcher because you have to have one of those. You can't wash the dishes unless you put a drain in the sink. Can't wash the dishes unless you put a drain in the sink. It's got to hold the water. Can't play baseball without a catcher. All the water's going to go down down the drain. Stops up the sink. Got to have a catcher. Got to have a backstop, right? Call the game, control the run game. If that dude can also hit 45 home runs, that's just bonus. Not many guys can do that. Defensive tackle that can stop the run, command a double team, play a double team, and not give up movement against most double team blocks, and then also rush the passer. Hey, Slade was doing that. Had some productivity in terms of pass rush, but also commanded some pass rush attention that helped guys on the edge. Consequently, that's a big reason why Michigan State ranked among the nation's leaders in sacks this year. Slade, good player. Speaking of catchers, can I talk catchers a little bit? Was it 1971 Johnny Bench, MVP of the National League? Best defensive catcher in the business. One of the best defensive catchers of all time. Changed the way people caught. He was a one-handed catcher. Great arm. Handled the pitching staff. Called a good game. All those great defensive attributes. Great defensive player. And he led the league in home runs. I'm not sure a player's ever had as much positive impact on a complete season than Johnny Bench did in 71, because he has an impact on every single pitch. Framing pitches, calling the game, every pitch he has, and then defensively with what he did, and then on offense, he had MVP numbers offensively. But in terms of more impacts on more pitches in the course of a season, nobody ever did it like Johnny Bench in 71. I think it was 71. Not that I was alive for that, but that's what I read. Actually, I've never heard anyone put it like that. That's just me taking information and BSing about it. All right, but Mallory, I keep an eye on Mallory this spring. I think he's got to add some weight. Question number 10, MCG07 from Parts Unknown says, which transfer on the defensive side of the ball do I expect will have the biggest impact? Good question, fun question, and that's a repeat question we're going to get all spring and all summer. I maintain the opportunity and ability and the right to change my pick after watching spring practice in the green-white game. But heading into winter conditioning, we're into winter conditioning now. I've not been over there to watch them. I don't know if they'll open it up or not. Some things might open up in March a little bit. Maybe, we'll see. But anyway, some of the defensive transfers, you got Jacoby Windman coming in from UNLV, a proven, good, solid linebacker. You've got an edge-type linebacker, and Aaron Brule coming from Mississippi State. Brule was supposed to be the face of the defense for Mississippi State this past season. Kind of disappointed a little bit. Might have lost a little bit of his stroke with that team a little bit. Wanted look elsewhere. He'll come in with 4-star ability. When I watch Brule, and I'll say this a lot, his arms are not all that cut. I was watching. You watch a lot of things out there. There was, Mississippi State had something going on like during training camp. And they're talking to Brule, talking to some people, and they show him, and he's just not what I would say. I don't think he was in tip-top shape for the season, and I'm not blaming him. I'm saying get that guy, put him in Michigan State's strength conditioning and nutrition program. Kenneth Walker went from being good to really damn good, and he changed his body. Okay, I think Brule possibly could. I'm curious to see if you can see if there will be a physical transformation in Brule after he's in the Michigan State strength program. I think it's possible. So Brule is a guy that I think has got a high ceiling, but I'll still have to wait and see on that one. Bogle, the kid from Florida, great potential. Was behind an NFL guy down in Florida. He's got some range. I think he's got a chance to make a lot of noise. And edge rushers have the potential to make a lot of noise because they play a noisy position. And then Amir Speed out, cornerback, Amir Speed, was a guy that started at the beginning of the year for Georgia, lost his job to some high-level talent for the Bulldogs. But speed's got to win a job in order to make an impact. All those guys could do it. It's a great question. He says, which one's going to have the biggest impact is the question. Dude, I'm going to go with Bogle, I guess. I'll wait and see what it looks like in the spring. Just the pass rush piece, need it from him. But Brule is interesting because I think that he's coming in with a chance to really rise in stock. But then, I look at Windman, and Windman is just a guy that UNLV that was just, he's the most proven of these guys. And he's going to be all jacked up going from mid-major level to Big Ten level. I don't have a good answer. I'll go with Bogle, I guess, because he plays a noisy position. But speed's important. Amir Speed. Question 11, Sparty from Pawleys Island, South Carolina says, hey, Jim, curious, who is responsible for substitutions on Tom Izzo's staff? He says, seems to be a lot of head scratching this whole season with some of the patterns of resting guys at worst possible times, and how much input does Tom Izzo have during the game with these decisions? Okay, Izzo delegates that to Dwayne Stevens, because Izzo's got other things he's trying to do during the course of the game, but they've got a pre-game construct on what they want the minutes to look like, what the rotation is, so that it's got some fluidity to it. And Izzo has an impact on that pre-game delegation. So it's Stevens, but it's also Izzo. But then Izzo will pull somebody out. So some of the times when you're thinking somebody is resting, they might be being benched. Brandon Dawson was benched a few times. Nick Ward was benched a few times, and their teams went to the Final Four. Gordon Suton was benched a few times. If you're not playing right, you're not playing. And that's the most effective way Izzo has found. It's old school, but it's the most effective way Izzo has found to gain a level of what we talked about all week. Quality control. I talked about the lack of quality control late in the D'Antonio era, especially in the defensive backfield, especially his last season. Quality control. Important. We see it on game days when you have miscommunications out there or guys just not doing things correctly in football or basketball. So how do you fix it? This is one way that it gets fixed. And it might seem uncomfortable to you, but Marcus Bingham was sitting the last 7-8 minutes of that game because of quality control. If you're not going to box out and do what they've been preaching for a week and a half or months or years, you're not playing. Early in the Indiana game, loose ball, Gabe Brown goes to get it, go the other way. The guy from Indiana jumps on the ground, wins it, corner, Hoosier, three-pointer. Izzo teaches it, loose ball, we are diving on the ground, we're getting it, we are getting floor burns, we are out-toughing the other team. We might win that loose ball and transition the other way, or we're going to create a tie jump ball at the worst. But we're not going to, just try to pick dandelions and do it. Gabe Brown, good kid, doing what he can, was picking dandelions. Three-pointer, 3 minutes into the game, Izzo, Brown, you're out. Came to the sideline, Izzo looked at Brown, and I don't know, I couldn't hear what he said, but you know what he's probably saying. If you're going to play like that, you can't play. Went back in later, tried harder, but that is quality control. So sometimes when you're seeing guys that are getting breathers at inopportune times, they might be getting the Brandon Dawson treatment. Brandon Dawson was getting it over and over and over, and then he'd do well, and then he'd have relapse, then they'd bench him. Then he'd come back, then he'd do well, then he'd have a relapse, they'd bench him. But it ended with him, Big Ten tournament, Chicago, trophy, streamers, confetti, sitting on the stage, trophy. I think Dawson had the MVP award, and Dawson's got his arm around Izzo. Thanks, coach, for staying on my back. That's the name of that tune. All right, Sparty from Pawleys Island, South Carolina says, also, who would be your clubhouse leaders to take over for Izzo once he decides to retire, which hopefully won't be for many years to come? He says, I'm personally thinking the successor is not on the staff right now. And he says, I would put Drew Valentine as my favorite. Do you have a Comparoni power index of your top picks? Thanks. That's from Sparty from Pawleys Island, South Carolina. Very popular question, very intriguing question. I get it all the time. And I'm not sure. I thought Dwayne Stevens was in there for it. Mark Montgomery has been impressive I know that, he ran his course at Miami of Ohio, but he's handling a lot of things with his team currently. I agree with you. Valentine is one to keep an eye on at Loyola. Good young coach that knows the program. And if he keeps Loyola the way Porter Moser had them, then Valentine's going to be right in there. Would not surprise me. Ultimately, I think it's Izzo's choice. Just like Krzyzewski, it was his choice to go with Shire. And I think it was Roy Williams' choice to go with Hubert Davis. And it was Dean Smith's choice to go with, who was the dude that followed him up? He was in the Final Four in 2000. Guy with the gray hair. That didn't work out all that great. Calhoun, it was his choice at UConn when he retired at a certain time so that he could get Kevin Ollie in there. Ollie won a national championship, and then it kind of came unraveled. I think Calhoun did not trust Ward Manuel to make that decision correctly, so Calhoun just kind of took it over. And you retire at a certain time so that you can force your own guy in there. I don't know if Izzo will do that. I'm not sure. Izzo's not thinking that right now, but by the time he retires, I think it's going to be a while, and there will be a book on Valentine by then. Others, boy, I don't know, man. That's going to be a tough job because you're going to be replacing a legend at a program with a fan base that expects a Final Four at least every third year, and that's crazy. So it's going to be really hard to keep people happy here. There'll be a lot of good coaches that'll be like, man, I don't want any part of that job. I'm just telling you. There'll be a lot of good coaches that will want it because Big Ten's going to pay well. That money's just going to keep getting better. But it's following that Izzo act. It's going to be really hard. Really hard to keep people happy. Because, I mean, really, one Final Four every 10 years is a good program, people. 2 Sweet 16s every 10 years is a good program. I don't mean to be a wet rag on everybody, but people, Michigan State loses to Penn State, everybody's going haywire about it. And Izzo's gathering that. He feels some of that. Even though he's not on social media, he feels some of that. And he doesn't like it. Question 12. Carl from Georgia says, are we beginning to see the end of the Izzo era? Are we beginning to see the end of the Izzo era? No, that was back in 2004. C. Bryan says, hey, Comp, with our 3 National Football League declarations, Napoleon Outlaw or Jalen Naylor, he says. Jalen Naylor, Jalen Reed, Xavier Henderson. They each made the opposite decision. I would have guessed they made the opposite decision of what I would have guessed would have been their best decision. He's talking about Naylor, Reed, and Henderson. They each made decisions. Naylor went to the pros. Reed and Henderson are coming back. He says, Naylor, seems like he should have stayed, gotten healthy, and had a longer productive year to improve his stock. That's what C. Bryan says, my old friend C. Bryan. With Naylor, I think Naylor became healthy for the bowl game, had a big bowl game, and he feels good. And he says, I want to go work out in the NFL right now. Because that's a guy that's had a lot of injuries. If he comes back, if he gets injured at the wrong time, then he can't work out. So is he going to get any better? He could have gotten better, maybe a little bit better next year, but I don't think he wants to roll the dice health-wise anymore. As far as Jaden Reed, C. Bryan says it doesn't seem like he can improve his stock, so he should have gone. He should have left, C. Bryan says. I don't necessarily disagree with that. It's good to have Jaden Reed back. Good kid, good guy, positive guy, good for the program, good player, good leader. It's good. Good all the way around. Good for Peyton Thorne. Thorne's glad he's back. Can he improve his stock? I don't know. Maybe not. Is he getting some name, image, and likeness cheese to stay? Wouldn't surprise me. He deserves it. He'd be a good guy for name, image, and likeness. He'd be a good pitch man. Seriously. Locally or statewide or whatever. Jaden Reed. And then C. Bryan says, Xavier Henderson. He says, this one is really puzzling. I know he got worn down during the second half of the year, yet that first half on tape shines. Seems like only a downside to him coming back. That's what C. Bryan says. Boy, he was good the first 2/3 of the season. I thought he was like at an All-American level the first 5-6 weeks. Played hurt, slowed him down to his credit, gave everything he had. So if he can stay healthy all year, that could help his stock. But I'm not sure what all went into that. I'm not sure where he would have been drafted this year, if drafted. So that's part of it too. So C. Bryant says, overall, the decisions are great for state, in my opinion, but curious your assessment of those three individuals. Just gave it to you. That's from C. Bryant from Flushing, Michigan. Spartan Roxy says, Tucker is clearly doing some, this is question number 14. Tucker is clearly doing some visionary things with college football, most recently the hiring of Brandon Jordan. Any insights as to other innovative things the program is exploring? Exploring, I can't think of anything new that you haven't already heard about, but they just continue to push the envelope with the social media presence, social media presence, and just what they're doing with recruiting. I mean, this is going to be their first full-blown calendar year of visits. So this summer, there were some visits last year, but you can really get into some, with the junior days and all those things as COVID subsides. It is subsiding, I think, isn't it? I don't know. I don't watch the scoreboard on those things. I don't know. But they're pushing things with name, image, and likeness, facilities. I don't know. I got a lot of questions that I didn't read about where Michigan State is with facilities. I'm not sure. I'll have to ask around to see. People are interested. I'm surprised I get that question a lot. What's up with the facilities? When are they going to be done? I'm like, you planning to camp out over there or something? You planning to use those facilities? I don't know. But they'll be done when they're done. He'll be healthy when he's healthy. Is that what Tucker says? So, I think I promised some film study, basketball. If you guys are really sick about basketball, we're going to do that. But first of all, let's go back to the comments, then I'll get to the film room. MSU Hunter Spartan says, Rutgers was an older team that has caught fire. Spartans need some of that. I agree with that. They look good. Blew out Illinois this week. James Bannon says, I just stumbled in. Spartan MD says, any chance of super seniors for next year? Are you talking about basketball or football? For basketball, the super seniors would be Gabe Brown or Marcus Bingham. I think there's a chance. I've asked Izzo about that. He says they're not really banking on it, but the scholarships are available. Neither of those guys are draftable right now. Does Michigan State want to keep them? I would imagine they'd like to keep them. So if they want to, they've got an extra year, and they don't think they're going to get drafted. Can you get some of that name, image, and likeness money going for them? You potentially you could pay a guy 6 figures to stay. Programs are going to be doing that. Jason Killip. It's great to hear from Jason Killip. Doing a great job as the recruiting coverage anchor for SpartanMag.com. Look forward to seeing him soon here on campus. George Page, former guitar player and keyboard player for Surrender Dorothy, one of the top 25 college bands in the history of East Lansing. George Page says, hey, Comp, I'm on a guest to search for the remaining members of Surrender Dorothy. When I track them down, we will do a reunion tour at Rick's. So that's what that was about. That the hashtag Rick's reunion. All right, George Page, I'm writing that down. If you can get those people. Are you talking about both girls, too? The blonde and the brunette lead singers? Now, the brunette, she used to live over Hidden Tree Apartments when I lived over there in the mid-1990s. Was on a hello basis with her. Hope she's doing well. They were good. Did some good cover stuff. I'd like to see that. In terms of having a reunion tour at Rick's, does Rick's still have a stage even? Do they still have bands there? We were going to sneak in there last week. I was talking last week about the 50 Fest we had. Some of my friends were in town. I think there's about 20 of us. And we went around to some old haunts. We were planning to go to Rick's. By the time it got late at night, we're all old. Everybody got tired at midnight. By the time we got to midnight, there was only 4 of us left, and we couldn't quite roll into Rick's 4 strong. If we're going to go into Rick's this old, you got to go in with 20 guys and girls, 10 guys, 10 girls. You got to roll in 20 strong so that you know that you're not taking yourself seriously. You're just like having an outing. Otherwise, you can't get away with it. I wouldn't want to be doing that. So I wanted to go down there. I think it's just all DJs down there now. College bands, that's an endangered species. I'll say it again. There's got to be, in a university of 45,000 students, there's got to be 4 people that can come out and do a decent cover band version of music that young people would like to go watch. But apparently it's not good for business because nobody's doing that. Either there are no bands or it's not good for business. I'm not sure. But when I mention that to young people and talk about what music used to be back for college, for decades, for the college experience, they look at me with wide eyes like, man, that would be so great. I don't know. But anyway, Surrender Dorothy, if they're going to be at that place, we might might have to turn it into SpartanMag outing. I'll be there. Actually, I don't think I'd want anyone to know I was there. I don't want people seeing how I rock out to Surrender Dorothy. Great to hear from George Page, though. Mr. Bowman, Tennessee has a rest for Derrick Henry. Tennessee has a rest for Derrick Henry. I'm not sure what that means. Spartan 94 says, hi, Jim. Hi, everyone. Raymond Sebastian says, on to football. I'm excited for what Tucker is bringing to the program. We got a tough schedule, but I like how we're building. What's your prediction on the wins and losses for 2022 football? All right, first time I've gotten that question. We'll have it a lot. That question will be coming up a lot, obviously, between now and September 4th when they open up at Spartan Stadium on a Friday night against the Western Michigan Broncos, who are going to be pretty good. Western Michigan is 8-5 coming off a bowl victory, right? Michigan State's football schedule is going to be very difficult. And I would expect Michigan State to not win as many games as they won in 2021. Just because law of averages. And maybe that's me with my what Nick Saban and Mel Tucker would call self-imposed limitations. I don't mean to disrespect the players or the coaches. I'm just talking in terms of probability. It's tough to win 11 games. It's happened not very many times in Michigan State history. Western Michigan, that should be a win, but it's going to be tough. It's going to be entertaining. It's going to be tough. At the end of the day, too much Peyton Thorne. Akron, I don't know anything about Akron, but 2-0, right? At Washington. Washington, new coach. It's a good time to play Washington. If you're going to go out west, catch them on a transition year after you've already played 2 games. So timing is good there. I think they're 3-0. Minnesota, man. Minnesota was quietly very good this year, right? They won their bowl game. They ranked in the top 10 in a lot of stats. Team defense, good. I mean, PJ Fleck, there's a lot of hype, carnival barking going on there, but does a good job. That's going to be a dandy. September 24th. I think Michigan State's going to be 3-0. I don't even know what Minnesota's got back. And honestly, I did not watch Minnesota play once this year. Well, the Ohio State game at the beginning of the year. Everybody saw that. That was the night of the Michigan State-Northwestern game, and I saw a replay of that. Usually I watch games like if Michigan State is playing against Purdue when I do the Spartan Plus it's not called Spartan Plus anymore. When I do the pre-snap read, usually I'm watching Purdue games film, like the previous 2 or 3 games, and invariably you'll watch them against Minnesota. Or if you're watching Ohio State tape, you're going to watch them against Minnesota. But nobody had played Minnesota recently enough for it to be tangible to my research. So I never saw Minnesota. And I've got some games, Big Ten Plus. I want to go back and watch some of it just to get an idea of what they did because they had a good season, man. It's good that one's in East Lansing. That's going to be a tussle. We'll learn a lot about the program that day. Then you go to Maryland. Maryland's pretty good. Got in a bowl game, did pretty well. They're not bad. Explosive quarterback. But this schedule stacks up well in terms of getting the team some momentum and some confidence. Figure out what's going on with the pass rush, the new running back situation, new defensive back situation. Minnesota's tough. That's a nice test there early, but 5-0 is possible. Then you play Ohio State at home. By then, you're supposed to lose that game, right? So that's probably a loss. But Ohio State was substandard this year by Ohio State standards. Crept back and barely beat Utah, to their credit. I mean, they've got great talent, but Ryan Day, the further that they get away from the Urban Meyer era, the more that he has to prove himself. And those things you can get cracks there. And anything worse than 12-1 at Ohio State, people get a little bit grouchy. And what happened with them against Michigan, not so pretty. And so by the time they play Ohio State, I assume Ohio State's going to be rolling. That's probably an Ohio State victory. But all right, then you got Wisconsin, you got the Badgers at home. It's another tester. So, I mean, I'm not Michigan State was good this year, to their credit. They got everything they could out of their talent. Michigan State was not as good as their record in 2021. Blam, I said it. Blam. No, I can't answer this because I'm on that's Nils. He doesn't know we're doing a show. If I answer it, you guys won't be able to hear him. I'll bring him on the show. I don't know. He's not been feeling well. I'll text him. I'll look down here in the comment section. Give me a yes or a no. You want me to call Nils and bring him on? Oh, we got a lot of super chats going on here. We got James Bannon. I didn't notice it. What's this one? Brad Fashenko. Man, I really appreciate. Give me a yes or a no. If you want me to call Nils and invite him to the program. Douglas Klein. We already got to him. But let me take care of the business here with the people that are hitting the tip jar. Really appreciate that. Really appreciate that. Brad Fashenko with a super chat. Thanks, Brad. Really appreciate a lot of the help that you've been doing all over the place. Not just here, but also donating to Okemos Baseball. Appreciate that, man. Really do. Thank you. Also, what do we have here? We've got James Bannon. Thank you, James Bannon. Thank you. Thanks for supporting SpartanMag.com. We plan to keep growing. SpartanMag.com, we do a good job as a news organization covering Michigan State sports, Michigan State recruiting. We're going to keep going forward, and we can do better. We're doing well, but we want to be the all-terrain, all-weather, all-the-time website that we think we can be. And that type of support definitely helps. James Bannon says, Michael Penix has transferred to Washington, and if he is healthy, it could be a problem. It's a great point, and I'd forgotten about that. If I'd gotten the memo on that, I've since forgotten it. So Michael Penix from Indiana has transferred to Washington. Yeah, if he stays healthy, he can be a problem. Game number 3. I agree with that. It's a good point. Thanks for bringing that to the show. I didn't realize that. Alex Moore, appreciate Alex Moore with a personal sponsorship. Thank you, Alex. Really appreciate it. He says, Jim, do you know if Tom ever tries to recruit international players anymore? Erasm Lorbeck gave us good depth in that Elite 8 run in 03. European players are very skilled to pick from. I've not heard of that in a long time. There was a guy from Australia they recruited back like around 1999 that they thought they were going to get, and they had him, and then they found out that he'd accepted a little bit of money, which blew his amateur status. He'd like accepted a couple $100 when he's 17 playing for a club team. The Lorbeck thing rankled Izzo to the point where I don't think he trusts much of that over there. That being said, Matty Sissoko technically is not. He's an international player. He played high school ball in Utah, of course. Speaking of international basketball, I saw Aloysius Anaganye today after practice. He was at practice. He's looking good. He's well dressed, and talked to him for quite a bit. It's good to see Big Al. Al was at practice. Izzo said he had some input here and there, but Al's in town for Michigan State's basketball reunion is this weekend for the Illinois game, so he came a couple days early. Aloysius Anaganye has got some business things going on between Detroit and Paris, and he asked me to call him about that. We might look into that a little bit more when we get into the off season, maybe, or something. I don't know. Kind of busy with things right now, but Anaganye, I was out in the Hall of History area at Breslin Center. You know how they've got the video screens that are constantly showing old replays of old games. Those replays go on all night. Even if nobody's in there and it's 4 a.m, those replays are still going. And I stop by once in a while and check out a little bit, some footage of the 1956 Michigan State Notre Dame game, basketball. 1949 Michigan State versus Valpo, basketball. Man, those guys back in the 40s and 50s, they turned the ball over all the time. You think Michigan State turns it over a lot now? Both teams, turnover. Nasty. But I tell you what, every time that they show one of those games from the 40s or 50s, next time you're at a Michigan State game, if you go over to the Hall of History area, when they're showing, like, there's a couple of those TVs that show old games from the 50s. When they show those games, the place is packed. Jennison was new at that time, but I mean, back then, they sardined people together, and there is not an empty seat. I mean, Michigan State could be playing U of D. They could be playing Northern Michigan, and it's packed every time. Basketball's come a long way in other aspects. So I'm watching, and I happen to be stopping, and I just kind of noticed out of the corner of my eye that they were showing some video of an old promotional photo that they did from 2000 of Michigan State being the contenders or something, and they all had it was a boxing motif going on. So like the Michigan State players, it was probably 02 because Marcus Taylor was in there. And Anna Gagne was there, and I just kind of noticed it. And then I was watching Michigan State versus Florida, the national championship game. It was going, and I was watching the first couple of minutes. I was to see how hard Bell and Peterson actually went to the boards. I was looking to see what Michigan State was doing for the press breaker initially against Florida. They went deep a little bit more. Initially, they went deep. Cleves had a layup, 10-5. And I was watching. I was getting ready to go. It was snowing out. Then I look, and here comes Anna Gagne. He's walking down the hallway. I was like, "Hey, Al, how you doing?" I took my mask off so he could recognize me. He goes, "Yeah, you're one dude I remember. I remember you." It's hard to believe that his freshman year was 22 years ago. I remember covering his recruitment. U of D made a charge for Anna Gagne. It was Michigan State versus U of D for Anna Gagne. Perry Watson went after him. Michigan State got him, but it wasn't. And Michigan State had some work to do there. So anyway, Anna Gagne looking good and happy. He's thinned out a little bit, but he looks spectacular. And I said, you were just on this video over here. He's taking some pictures and stuff. I go, "You were just on?" He goes, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, that weightlifting thing, or that boxing thing." He goes, "Yeah, that was my favorite photo shoot. That was fun." I'm like, "It was just on." He says, "Oh man, I wish I would have seen that." And then we sat there and watched the national championship game for a minute. I'm like, "Look, there you go, freshman." He goes, "Yeah." I said, "I remember walking to a press conference once, around this time of year in February, parked, and was crossing Shaw. We were going to the football building. It must have been signing day in February or something. Izzo was over there. For some reason, Izzo was, maybe there were I don't know, but for some reason, the press conference, I seem to remember that we were walking. I know what parking lot it was. We were walking we were at the tennis court parking lot, the old tennis courts, south of the stadium. Got out of my car, was walking. Just happened to be behind Izzo and Gus Ganakis. They were having a little conversation. I was walking. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop or anything. But I heard Izzo tell Ganakis, he's like, "If we get Anna Gagne healthy, I think we win the whole thing." I was like, whoa. I mean, this is 2000. Of course, I'm not going to write that. It's off the record. You don't eavesdrop. And what you do is you wait 22 years and tell everybody on YouTube is what you do. But I told Al that. I'm like, "You had that injury, your foot, right?" He says, "Yeah, plantar fasciitis thing going on." But Anna Gagne was a bench player, but Izzo was telling Ganakis, if we get Al healthy, we can win the whole thing. It's 2000. I mean, Michigan State hadn't won the whole thing in anything since 79, right? Which is not, it's 21 years. But back then, at my age, 21 years seemed like generations. Like hearing someone say could win the whole thing, I'm like, man, could they really? I mean, they just gone to the Final Four in 99, but you go to the Final Four, you're 2/3 of the way there. You've won 4 games. You got to win 6 to win the whole thing. Is my math correct on that? Al's like, "Yeah, he said that, huh? Yeah, my foot came together and helped." We're watching him against Haslam and Donnell Harvey. And Gagne's like, "Yeah, my job was I was supposed to try to get in Haslam's head. Just get in his head and try to get him thinking about anything except the game." That's what Al told me today. Harvey, look at Harvey. Look, he's breathing hard. Look, this is what Anna Gagne's like watching the national championship game just for a few minutes, and he's remembering what the scouting report was and what he was supposed to do, and he was like just enjoying watching the paint still dry 22 years later. Don't get caught watching the paint dry. 22 years later, you can watch the paint dry a little bit. The paint looks good. It's a national championship. There's a banner up in Breslin if you haven't noticed. Anyway, Anna Gagne said bye to him. He's excited to have a good reunion weekend. So that's Anna Gagne. It's my Anna Gagne story for today. Anna Gagne, by the way, played internationally, professionally. That's how I started talking about this, because Alex Moore was asking if Michigan State would be recruiting European players anymore. Anna Gagne's father, and I think his mother also, were from Africa. I can't remember which African nation. Excuse me. But because of that, he could play European professional basketball and not count as an American. I think they still have that rule that you can only have 2 Americans on a team. even though the rest of the world has really caught up substantially with the United States in terms of basketball talent. But still, the Premier League in Europe and so forth, you're allowed 2 Americans. Everybody, they don't want a team to stockpile with Americans. But Anna Gagne, if your parents were not American, then you can count as an international. And I think Jason Klein counted as an international. I think his mother was from Spain or something. So he played European ball for a while and did not count as an American. Anyway, Anna Gagne went over there, and he's just a physical wonder kind. And stayed and played 16 years. I asked him today, how many years you play over there? 16 years of professional ball overseas. Did well, including several years, I think, in the Premier League. I'm talking France, Italy, Spain, Greece. You know, it's one thing when you're playing international basketball in Siberia. It's a different thing if you're playing in France, Spain, Italy, Greece. That's what he did. Did well. Now he's in business, and his business operates between Detroit and Paris. And Anna Gagne, you talk to him now, and you can tell that he spends most of the year not speaking English. Because when he speaks English now, he's got like an accent on it. He always had a little bit of an accent from his parents, but now it's even more. Interesting. He's a good guy. They always knew what they were going to get out of him. So you guys want nils, huh? Yes, yes, no, no. We got a no. We got 3 no's and 2 yeses and another yes. It's tied. So tie goes to the runner. We're not going to go with nils. Voted against it. Plus, I want to get to the film study here a little bit for those of you that are crazy enough to want to get into some film study. Our video is not great, but we'll get into it in a minute. Let me buzz through here real quick, make sure I didn't miss anything else. Let's go to the film study right now. Jason Killup, great to see Jason. Will Stallworth says, hey, Comp, what's the website where we can get the Paul Bunyan Trophy? I think it's called rivalrytrophy.com, rivalrytrophy.com. Spartan Marinelli 87 says, Spartan Mag Live, love it, go green. E-Money J says, any chance Michigan State wins out? I agree with Brad Fashenko, 0 chance. All right. Let's go over here and we're about done with Spartan Mag for tonight, but now they're getting beat with the same thing over and over. Kinda, yes, and you think they didn't make adjustments. Michigan State did attempt to make adjustments. Izzo did say ball screen defense was not good enough. It needs to get better than that. And there's going to be better teams than Penn State running ball screen stuff, but you have to do it.
Call from.
Oh, tough.
To accept, press 1. To send a voicemail, press 2.
All right, let's go down to Austin, Texas. A good supporter of Spartan Mag Live. I just went through a lot of stuff with Michigan State basketball. I think some of you are still awake. I think Old Tuck might want to talk football, but let's welcome back to the show from Austin, Texas, via Ludington, Michigan, an old COA conference guy. Old Tuck, how you doing, Old Tuck?
Old Tuck, Comp, I'm calling in to tell you that your screen's been frozen for about 20 minutes.
Oh, crap. That didn't work?
It's been just frozen on a defensive possession there.
And you couldn't? Could you hear me
ball
also?
Screen.
Could you hear me or no?
We could hear you talking about other plays, but it's frozen on the screen of that ball screen that Penn State was running. So I just wanted to let you know.
I wonder was it like it right at the beginning?
Yeah, it's been for about 20 minutes.
All right. I noticed that we still have the number of people that are in it hasn't changed, so I thought people was watching. I wonder
they're listening because they can see you and they can hear you. They just can't see
couldn't
the screen
see it.
moving.
Couldn't see what I was talking about. Darn.
No, we can just see you in the corner talking.
And it was just blank, huh? Well, I guess that was a fail then.
Good commentary.
I don't understand why that didn't work because did you watch when I had Izzo on there? Could you see Izzo or no?
No.
Couldn't see Izzo either. Okay.
No.
And you couldn't hear him either, right?
Actually, no. Yeah, we could. I'm sorry, we could see Izzo. Yeah.
See, that doesn't see Izzo. That's puzzling to me because the way I processed the Izzo video is exactly the same way I processed the film room video. So I'll go back when people.
I went and checked my phone and everything, but I just wanted to let you know.
I appreciate it. I really appreciate that. When I can go back in and edit that out since it was a dud, but I'm really disappointed by that because as you can tell, I put a lot of time into that and thought it would be some good stuff.
Yeah.
But well, darn. But I appreciate you calling in.
It was good either way. We appreciate it, Comp.
All right, appreciate it, Old Tuck. Thanks a lot.
We'll talk to you, man.
Well, thanks for calling in on that one. I appreciate everybody. I should have checked over here in the comments area to get clued in that it wasn't working, but. Very disappointing way to end tonight's show, kind of like the Michigan State-Penn State game in Happy Valley on Tuesday night. Had some decent stuff, but this is what it was supposed. Now, why would it do that? Not really sure. Anyway, we will. This is what it was right here. I mean, it's working on mine. Not sure why that wouldn't work for you guys. But anyway, we had some fun with it, but it didn't work. And might try it again sometime. Or maybe not. Anyway, we're going to wrap it up. We're 1:45. Appreciate everybody that's been here watching. Appreciate all the support we got. Truly do. And we'll be back next week. And if you see me on Saturday at the Illini game, make sure to say hi. I might be in the stands for that one. Like to stay in touch a little bit. And appreciate everybody watching tonight and being a part of SpartanMag Live. Sorry I blew the last 20 minutes with video that you guys couldn't see. Very disappointed with that. I'm angry and disappointed. Anyway, otherwise, great show tonight. Thanks for everybody's feedback and contributions. We'll see you next week. Make sure to give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel here, and we'll see you next time. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a great week.